Huh?
It was a little scary, but yeah, go ahead.
What's scary about that? I'm confused by your reaction. You don't want people to care for you?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Sounds like it.
Okay,
but
yeah,
I'm
go
going
for
to
it.
ask you, okay?
Yeah.
So I recognize, okay, so first thing is when someone, sorry, I'm getting emotional. Hey, what's up, dude?
Nothing much. What's up with you, dude?
Dude, give me a second. I
Okay.
can't see your camera.
That's because I haven't turned it on yet.
Well, that would explain. Hold on.
There you
People
go.
can't hear you either.
Okay, well, that's your fault.
Hey. Hey, what's up, dude?
Nothing much. How's it going?
Good. I am so happy to be talking to you today.
Cool. I'm happy to be talking to you.
I was just offering a quick disclaimer in chat and was also giving them some history that for the first time, I think we like cross-reacted,
Uh-huh.
right? So like you reacted to something that I said and then I reacted to your reaction without like actually engaging you in dialogue. And I think we both recognize the shortcomings of that method, but it's still useful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the streamer way, yeah?
That is the streamer way. So let me can you count to 10 for me? I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, what's up? My name is Steven. I'm here today to be as non-controversial
Testing
and friendly as possible. Are you good? Yeah?
Yeah, we're good. Are you actually here to be as non-controversial, as friendly as possible?
No, I just know that sometimes your audience is a little, is a little primed to be hostile against me, so.
Yes, so we actually addressed that as well. And so I was explaining that, what we do here is, I think a lot of people will get upset when you have a conversation with someone because it implies that you're not that implies it, it's that you're platforming their beliefs. So you're giving them a space to talk about things. And our approach is always to try to engage in dialogue. And that becomes especially important for people that we don't necessarily agree with. What do you want to talk about today? Anything in particular?
No, I guess what have you guys been doing lately?
I've been traveling a lot. I've been going on like podcasts and stuff. So I think we've been getting more invitations for me to go to places, which I'm sure you're familiar with because I've seen you've been all over the place. And I think we're also trying to figure out so talking to people and creating like passive content is like a great way to actually help people. We have some indicators that even watching like our YouTube channel for a couple of months has some small but noticeable impact on people's mental health in a positive way. But what I'm really like working on now, like in my own head, is how can we actually support behavioral change and making like more of an impact on people's lives. So as opposed to just focusing on like growth and having more people watch you, it's like, okay, for the people that are watching us, what can we do that helps them actually like make substantial change in their lives over some amount of time? That's what I'm thinking about. So some of that stuff involves like we're doing more and more like clinician education. So thinking about, okay, so for some of the problems that we have, like one of the biggest challenges that we see with things like technology addiction or pornography addiction is that most clinicians are not trained in this stuff.
Sure.
So also some of these other like non-clinical entities like imposter syndrome, burnout. So there isn't like formal training in this. And the default is like, okay, if you have a problem with imposter syndrome, go see a therapist. But nowhere in, the certification of a therapist and the licensure of a therapist and the curriculum of a therapist are they required to learn about burnout. So we're seeing like all kinds of challenges in our school systems, in our mental health professionals. And so we're trying to address those gaps.
Gotcha. What do you think? I know you brought up, I think you said porn, gaming, and imposter syndrome. Are these like the most common people that you see through your, through your chats, through the coaching and everything you do? Or is there like a common set of problems where you see most people have like these things? Yeah.
I'd say that like relationships with technology are probably number one. So whether that's video games, whether that's pornography, whether that's social media. So I think that in all cases, the fact that there's a digital intervention.
Yeah.
Anyone who uses a digital intervention is using certain methodologies to increase the engagement of that digital intervention.
Okay.
And so that increase in engagement means more utilization of the thing, which then moves us closer to addiction, which then costs people time in other dimensions of their life. So I'd say tech addiction is number one.
Okay. Can I tell you something that's very, very, very annoying to me?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you see on the internet There's a lot of feelings about you've got like capitalism, communism, in terms of like atomization of society and how capitalism alienates us. You've got people that complain about loss of religion. You've got people that talk about red pill and feminism. And all of these people have all these ideas about what's going on with society. And I feel like it's not very sexy or fun to talk about. But I honest to God feel like 90% of the changes that like young people are going through have to do with cell phones and the internet. And it blows my mind that nobody talks about that. I feel like if you look at the vast majority of, well, let me qualify. I'm sorry. When I say nobody talks about that, I mean, when people are talking about diagnosing social ills, it's always, it's got like such a heavy like political or like, some sort of like critical analysis of society. But it feels like people don't talk enough about how much cell phones and the internet have fundamentally altered every single aspect of our lives in like an unrecognizable way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't get quite as frustrated, I think. But what's frustrating about that to you?
I feel like the substitution of real life interactions and the I guess the disappearance of more and more places where I've got a friend that calls them warm places, where basically it's places where you go and when humans are around other humans, opportunities for relationships, for friendships, for collaboration, like these things just kind of organically sprout. And those places are slowly disappearing and they're being replaced by more and more online spaces, which have some major benefits and some major downsides. And I feel like that's like fundamentally altering the fabric of how we all relate to each other. Like for like a more tangible point, I keep seeing these like charts going around where you can see like, oh, how do you meet a girlfriend or boyfriend? And it's like the vast majority meet through friends, some meet through like school or work. And then like as of 10 years ago, you see like online stuff go from 0% to like 65% in terms of like how we meet our significant others now. And it's just crazy to me that there isn't I can't imagine. I'm sure. I think you're a tad older than me, right? I'm 35. I can't imagine like living in school with social media. Like just imagining the pressure of I have to go home and now I'm still 100% connected to every single person. That is unbelievable to me. And I feel like people don't talk about that as much as I would imagine it would warrant. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think people do talk about it. I think it's so funny because it's almost like exactly what you're describing is like what you're running into, which is that, so you're saying, okay, like people blame capitalism, people blame communism, and you're saying the problem is that people don't talk about the loss of third spaces. Or cell phones or the internet. There are a lot of people talking about that.
Sure. It might be also that I select for these obviously heavily political spaces.
So I think that's what's going on.
I'm falling victim to my own diagnosis.
Exactly.
True,
right?
Yeah, okay.
So now based on your social media algorithm, you were seeing like, oh, everyone is like misdiagnosing the problem. Or you are now attributing, so for someone else, oh, everything that's wrong in the world is capitalism.
Sure.
And now for you, kind of, I'm oversimplifying here, and I don't actually think you think this, but everything wrong with the world is that people don't talk about the fundamentals. I think a lot of people are talking about the fundamentals.
Okay, that's good.
I think the challenge is that I completely agree with you that the problem is that the question of cell phone and internet use is being talked about in places that are separated from cell phone and internet use. Right.
So wait, can you repeat that again? Say that again.
Yeah. So the places where people are talking about it are largely separated. That's not precisely true. I'll give a couple examples. But the problem is the places that these discussions are happening are not to the audience that needs to hear it.
So it's like educators talking to psychologists or like therapists talking to, instead of like talking to children.
If you go to like the American Psychiatric Association conference, which is actually happening right now, like the amount of time they spend on digital stuff and the impact of the internet has skyrocketed.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
But you do have some popular media people. Like I think, there's this guy named Jonathan Haidt. I've never met the dude, but he's like wrote a book and is advocating for like basically no cell phone use under the age of 16.
I kind of agree. Yeah. Jeez.
And so there are people talking about it. And I think he's getting like mainstream traction and stuff like that. So I think, and I'm also like part of this, this task force that is defining like some of the nature of peer support for addictions and things like that. So like these conversations are happening, but I think the challenge is that the people who are falling victim to this are usually on the internet, and that kind of content is hard to disseminate on the internet.
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out, it's not sexy. And what most people resonate with is like emotional activation.
Yeah.
That's what pushes content.
Yeah, I
So
100% agree. Yeah, yeah,
I think to kind of riff off of that a little bit. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I see in our society is that we don't hone our perception. So this is kind of like has been my shtick for the last 18 months, where if you look at like what we work on, so we'll work on things like emotions, we work on things like logic, but human beings, generally speaking, do not question their perception. Their perception is very like atrophied or underdeveloped.
Can you be a little bit more, when you say perception, do you mean like how we introspect on ourselves, how we understand how other people are thinking, feeling? Yeah, go ahead.
Literally how we perceive. So there's a great yogic concept called glishta.
Okay.
Glishta means coloring. So if you look at the way that you interact with the world is like objective, but then your mind adds some color to what you see or what you perceive. So if I text you and you don't text me back within 10 minutes, the fact of the matter is that you haven't texted me back in 10 minutes. But then what happens is my mind attaches a significance to that.
Yeah.
And what happens on the internet is that we're reacting to all of this stuff like tweets or whatever. And then like we don't look at what our mind, so we judge something when we say this person is bad because I see their tweet. What we don't pay attention to is what is all the ambiguity that my mind fills in, which is actually a lot, especially on places like Twitter.
Yeah.
Because the shorter form the content is, the more your mind has to fill in.
Yeah, it's like when you remember old video games as looking way better than they actually were, and then you go back and you look at it, you're like, wait a second. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? So our mind adds quite a bit to the equation. And I think the whole problem is we don't realize that. And furthermore, the less we realize it, the more what our mind adds to the equation goes out of our control. So literally in the process of psychotherapy, what we do is you have an interaction with someone, like let's say like someone has a history of trauma, and then they go through the world and then their brain interprets these stimuli through the lens of trauma. So literally in psychotherapy for trauma, what we do is go through the process of removing what your mind is adding to the equation, the implication. We do the same thing in social anxiety. Oh, this person didn't do X, Y, Z, and therefore this means this.
Yeah.
So we know that this process has a lot of clinical benefit.
Yeah.
And so in the yogic system, what we try to do is aklishta, which is remove all the colorings of our mind. And then you have a direct perception of the world as it is.
Interesting. Okay. The one thing that's very frustrating is I don't like that therapy has such a heavy connotation about treating an illness, when I feel like there are things that we talk about relating to therapy. So you're talking about getting a more accurate perception of the world that everybody should practice, not necessarily accusing you of doing this or anything, but like it's funny because there have been times where I've sat in on friends like doing therapy because they wanted help like reinforcing stuff outside of therapy, and I learned things inside of their therapy session that is like incredibly helpful for me, which I think is interesting. One thing that when you talk about the perception, it's so funny because I think that when you navigate the world in any other discipline, at least from my personal experience, you learn not to ever trust yourself because you know that your mind is an imperfect record keeper. You know that it's impossible for you to keep track of yourself while you're performing yourself. And when you practice things, you're always like recording and watching later. So for instance, if you're practicing music, if a teacher walks by and they catch you practicing without a metronome, he's gonna kill you. Like what you're wasting your time. You don't know if you're on time or not. You have to have a metronome going. Or if you are, if you're doing a practice for a speech, you're recording yourself, or you're recording yourself on a recorder and you're playing it back. The idea of like taking videos and then watching later when you can just focus on 100% perceiving what you're doing instead of trying to remember what you're doing and doing it all at the same time is so common in other things. But when it comes to how we interact with loved ones or friends, or when we have social interactions or whatever, we don't like have that same habit of going back to, I guess, like kind of review it. But then we have very strong impressions of exactly what happened. And I've caught myself sometimes going back and reading conversations. Somebody's like, "Oh, you thought I was so mad at you," and I wasn't. And I'm like, "No, you were so." And then I'll go back and I'll read it, and I'll be like, "I'm out of control here. Wait, what's happening?" Yeah, and it's funny. I feel like being able to go back and review prior interactions is actually really insightful, and hopefully it makes you a little bit more humble in terms of how well you understand your own behavior, or gives you more insight into it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that would be incredibly helpful. So we certainly see that in like psychotherapy training. We do that when we're it's part of our coaching curriculum, is like, things like role play and offering feedback. I wouldn't say that. I don't think the majority of people do that, though. I would actually say that, like, in my experience, the majority of professional work does not have review of your work as a formal process.
Sure.
So if you look at someone who's like working at some, office that does tax prep, like, I don't think like, I don't think they're going back and like re-auditing the taxes that they've done for their clients to see what could have been improved. I think like dedicated performance improvement is absolutely there for the examples you mentioned, which is like performers, sure, right? So you watch game tape, you do replay analysis, but the majority of people just assume, like, so for medical doctors is like a really good example where we actually don't do this much at all. So there are some situations where we'll do this, like, so we have like a conference called M&M usually. Like, this is an academic medical centers, which is not where most people are. So M&M is morbidity and mortality, and basically every month someone selects a case that didn't go ideally, and then we dig into it and we try to understand what could have been done better. It's usually presented by the person who is the subject of the case. So here's a patient I had, here's what ended up happening, here's what I understood about it, and then people will kind of discuss it. But that kind of like replay analysis is largely absent from most of life.
Oh, interesting. I would have imagined that would have carried over, because every field that I've been involved in, like if you go to the gym, people will say record your lifts in case you're messing something up. If you're doing music, you've got to be recording and watching.
What percentage of people record their lifts and watch them at the gym?
Well, I mean, at the very least, it's like a known expected thing. I guess I wonder how many musicians record themselves playing and listen back to their audition tapes. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know that. Maybe I just got lucky. I was in good schools. I don't know. Or good high school.
I think that like when you have formal education, sure. But like, so there's studies that show that within 5 years, so there's this assumption that experience leads to improvement. So there are studies that show within the first 2 to 5 years of finishing your medical training, you basically like determine what your rank as a doctor is, and then you stay relatively static. And the difference between the people who are in the top rank and the bottom rank is their method of learning. And so there's an assumption that if you've been practicing medicine for 30 years, you will be better at it than someone who knows less. There's a really great set of studies out of this place called the Martini Clinic, which is a clinic in Germany that focuses entirely, I think, on GI surgery. So they're super, super specialized. People from all over the world come there. And part of the reason that their outcomes are really, really good is because they had, I think the chief of their like GI surgery program had to go through remedial training because he did not meet the metrics that people below him, like he did not meet the metrics.
Yeah.
So he had to go through it too. So this process of systematic improvement is actually, like, I think in the minority. Like, most people just show up, do their thing, and rely on relatively systemic issues of process improvement.
Okay.
Right? You have like performance reviews at work, and they like collect something, and it's just like kind of a stock sort of thing.
You're probably right. I think I actually probably agree with that. It's depressing, but yeah, it's like I'm sure I've said this to you before, or we've said it to me, but like the idea that in high school you learn that practice makes perfect, and then when you get to college, they tell you that's absolutely not true. Perfect practice makes perfect, and the way that you practice and the way that you train is far more important than the hours that you spend just grinding away at something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been stuck at basically the same rank in Dota for the last 5 or 6 years, and I started working with a coach, and like, I've gained about 60%. Yeah, I've moved up by like 60% of MMR within like 2 months.
Geez, so what are you now, like 1,700? I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry. You've made fun of my league rank before. Okay, I take it personally.
I was 1,700 when I started. I'm like 2,800 now.
That's so, okay. Well, listen, enough. I grinded league for 4 years and I couldn't make it to Diamond 4 again. So you know what? We all have our faults. Yeah,
that's fair enough. I kind of wish I was back at the 1,700s because then I could dumpster all those noobs finally.
Well,
now that I know.
Or no, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you asked me what I've been up to. What have you been up to?
All sorts of stuff. Yeah, running around, arguing with people, doing everything online. Finally got my little podcast stuff started, so I've got a studio downstairs, and I'm running those shows. And yeah, just climbing and growing and all that good stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
What? So Destiny. I've been. Do you prefer Destiny or Steven?
Steven's good. Yeah.
Okay. So Steven, I've been watching your stuff for years and years and years, and I think we had our first like interaction like 4 years ago or something. And I've noticed that there's been like, despite the fact that you got like, removed from certain platforms, it seems like your attraction has grown immensely. How do you understand that change?
Like, as in, like, why do I think I'm growing, or?
Yeah. Like, what's changed? Because I don't see, in some ways, too much different. In some subtle ways, I see a big difference. But I think that, you've been basically making content for years and years and years, and I've seen what I would perceive or assume to be a different yield on a similar effort.
Oh, sure. I think that without sounding self-aggrandizing, coming off of what we just talked about, I put a lot of work into introspection and into like iterating on things that I've done. So to ground that out, say we're doing like debates or whatever, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the facts that I need for a debate, and then how do I want to present those facts, and then how do I want to come off afterwards, and then how do I want to respond to responses. Like, these are things that I spent a great deal of time. Like, sometimes I'll be on stream writing out notes for like, okay, well, in this conversation, I think I want to be more aggressive, and I really want to focus on this thing, and I'm not going to let this person get away with this point. And I put a lot of work into reviewing, looking at reactions and responses to things, and then adjusting my behavior based on that. And I think I've been streaming for like 15 years now, and then doing politics maybe for 8 years. Like, I've kind of seen what works. I've seen what doesn't work. I've got a lot of experience, so I can see kind of like, I can pull back and see kind of like the ups and downs and stuff. I can see the mistakes that other people make. And then, yeah, I think it's just been kind of like slowly reiterating through that process over and over again. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. When did you start this process of, like, let's say, call it replay analysis?
Probably, I don't know, 2011, because my background is I played StarCraft 2 professionally, semi-professionally, or whatever. And in StarCraft, the way that you play is you grind and grind and grind. And as you're playing, let's say that you play a certain race, you run into a certain build and you lose to it. Okay, well, I'm going to try making my hatchery 1 supply sooner, or I'm going to try scouting this overlord 30 seconds sooner, or and you like kind of slowly tweak things until you can defeat it. And that kind of iterative learning process got super hammered into my brain, 1 through music. I went to college for music, and then 2 through StarCraft. And then, I mean, I think you can apply the same skill set probably to almost anything in life. And then debates and everything were the next thing. Yeah.
Interesting. So you haven't noticed, or you would not. So there hasn't been much change.
I mean, things. It kind of feels like sometimes in life, it feels like you work at stuff, and then you kind of like whoop, and then you kind of work at stuff, and then it's like whoop, and then you kind of work at stuff. So like, there's like a feeling that I've kind of like plateaued for a bit, and then something happens, and then it feels like I've got a big bump, and then it kind of like that. So no, I don't think over the biggest change is 7 months ago or 6 months ago. It's probably ADHD medication. But aside from that, I think everything's just kind of been like small tweaks. And then once you've made the small tweaks and you've prepared yourself, you're waiting for kind of the opportunities. And then, luck is preparation meets opportunity. Then an opportunity happens, and then you jump on it, and then you kind of like continue to move from there, I would say. Yeah.
Interesting. So, and I'm kind of curious if this is okay to talk. Like, is this interesting to you?
Yeah, for sure. Whatever you want to talk about. Yeah.
So I'm curious what your like personal experience of the fluctuations in how the world receives you is. So do you feel like before this stuff happened, like, how did you feel about it? How do you feel about yourself now? So it's clear to me that I'm kind of curious about your subjective experience of this as opposed to the objective process of improvement and growth.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because I grew up, if I've got that dismissive, avoidant archetype or whatever. I'm not, whatever it is. I grew up very, I think I'm very emotionally independent of other people's evaluations of me. So I think it's pretty normal that people, if you're in a room and there's 10 people saying you're, a big meanie, you start to feel like a big meanie. I think it's a really normal human response, is that we kind of reflect what other people say about us into ourselves. And I don't seem to do that as much. So it gives me a lot of resilience in terms of dealing with people publicly. Obviously, I have conversations, and obviously there's a lot of people that have very strong opinions about me that I feel are not true, but it doesn't like negatively affect me emotionally. But for whatever reason, also, I hope I have like the intellectual humility to understand that, like, well, if a whole bunch of people disagree with a certain thing, I need to be very careful, because I'm essentially wading into an arena where I'm saying, well, I'm right, and these 150,000 people are wrong. And 99.99% of the time a human does that, you're wrong. So I guess it's trying to balance out. It's trying to balance out to make sure I'm not being emotionally affected, but also to make sure that I'm not being too too resistant to any sort of external criticism, and balancing that out is definitely very challenging. Because even when there's a room full of people saying like something horrible about you, usually there's some underlying fact of the matter that they're hinting at, and it's good to understand at least why people think that way, rather than to turn a blind eye to it and say like, oh well, screw you, you guys are all, you just haters, I don't care, and then just kind of like walk away from it. So
that's interesting. So I'm kind of curious, what do you how do you think about yourself?
I like to think that I have like really strong foundations that I've kind of like built myself off of. So I have some internal, like understanding of what I believe to be good and moral. And then I think that kind of like stems out into, how I treat other people, how I approach my work, and then the impact I think I should have on the world. And then I kind of like try to build all of that out from there. And then I hope that at the end of the road for all of these, I'm also receptive enough to make slight changes in like my applied positions if I feel like other people have shown me that they're not congruent with my internal positions. That's like very broad. If we get more specific, I can be more specific, or yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a pretty specific question
Sure.
for you. Do you think of yourself? I'm not asking if you are or aren't. In your mind, if I was like watching your thoughts over the course of the day, do you think of yourself as successful?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure.
So you have thoughts about your success throughout the day?
Yeah, I think about, well, I don't know if I'd say success, but like, I definitely like, I try to ground myself a lot in terms of like, where have I been? Where am I at now? Like, where can I be in the future? Like, am I orienting myself correctly? Like, am I squandering or wasting like an opportunity? I try to keep track of all these things. Yeah.
Do you feel proud?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Yeah. There's always like everything is like, everything has to be in moderation. Like if I don't want to like imposter syndrome myself and I'm like, oh no, I should be doing everything so much better. But I also don't want to be like, resting on my laurels and be like, I've done so well. Like I can basically just coast from here on out. So yeah, there's like an idealized version of myself that I'm kind of aiming for. I'm really happy with where I'm at. I understand I could be doing better. So I keep kind of like striving for that higher thing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because as I hear you talking about stuff, I actually think about like this idea of perception that I mentioned earlier. And it seems like you don't have much glishta. So like as I hear about your thoughts, I hear a lot of like receiving what signals are there and also being very careful about what you cultivate within your mind.
Sure.
So like really intentionally cultivating a balance between pride and humility. I don't hear you running away from either one.
Yeah. I don't know. We might end up agreeing with did you pronounce it glishta?
Glishta. Klishta.
Okay, klishta. We might agree. The wording that you use though is a long time ago. I would say like probably 5 or 6 years ago. I kind of like set out to rid myself of all biases and misperceptions. But I think over the past like 4 or 5 years, I kind of have a different approach where I think what I say instead is that like I think that everybody probably has some built-in biases. So I just try my best to find them rather than to trick myself or delude myself to think I don't have them. One really tangible example might be let's say that I want to watch a video and I'm researching on topic X and I'm listening to commentators A and B talk about it. I might know that I really don't like commentator A. I hate this guy and I'm so primed to disagree with anything he says. I might write a physical note at the top of my document saying that so that when I'm watching the show and they're talking about the topic, maybe A says something. He's like, well, I think that 2 + 2 = 4. And I might immediately go, I don't even know if that's true here. And then I have to stop and remember, okay, I really don't like this guy. 2 + 2 is probably 4. I need to be aware of, and keep track of like these negative thoughts I have about this person because they might actually influence other things I'm thinking about, and that would be not good. So I don't know if that maps onto your concept or if it's like a little bit of a different direction. But
I think I think it maps on beautifully. So the really interesting thing is that a lot of people will ask me questions about how do I fix this thing? What do I do? So one of the big challenges that I have is if you look at some of this yogic literature on Klishta, so ridding yourself of biases is not how you rid yourself of biases.
Okay.
So the yogis actually say that the way to rid yourself of biases is not to actually remove it, but just to notice it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That
cool.
Noticing and awareness is sufficient for digestion, metabolism, or removal. And this is what's so confusing is that a lot of people like on the internet have difficulty with that concept because our society is so oriented towards doing instead of noticing or increasing awareness that, basically the people who will will buy into that are people who have enough trust in what I say. But the concept of like noticing is sufficient to fix a problem is very alien to a lot of people.
Sure.
Because their experience of it is that it requires a struggle to fix.
Okay.
So they'll struggle with something, right? And then on willpower, you overcome it one day and then you lose the next day. So you naturally default to thinking, okay, I need to boost my willpower so I win every day. They don't recognize that you can melt away the source of the want or the desire or the conflict through awareness.
Okay. It kind of reminds. I'm using a lot of music examples here. Sorry, but it kind of reminds me of when you go to college for music and you're studying like formally how to analyze a piece, and you're writing down like, well, what am I listening to? What am I hearing? And you're trying to analyze it. Sometimes in the course of your analysis, because every chord you analyze comes after the last one, at some point you're writing very, very, very weird stuff, and it doesn't really make sense anymore. And if you've got a good teacher, usually instead of like looking at the paper and making sure every single thing is correct, and what's going on, the teacher will tell you, well, hold on, put your pen down or pencil down. It should be a pencil. Take a step back, close your eyes and listen to it. And what do you actually hear? And when you take a step back and you listen to it, you're like, oh, this is like a, this is an authentic cadence. Oh, this was there was a modulation like 3 measures ago, obviously. And when you actually take a step back and you're just take a minute to listen to it instead of like over trying to analyze like every little thing, you're like, oh, I totally perceive this thing now. It's so obvious when I just put the pencil down and think for a moment and listen and perceive instead of just trying to constantly write everything up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think that too is like very common where people will think, so what I'm hearing is that listening and perceiving gives you answers even more so than like logical approaches or analysis in some situations. We're not saying it's
a little bit, yeah.
And that's some,
or the really important thing I was going to say there is that like at the end of the day, whatever logical process you're involved in, you have to remember that you're not a machine. Nothing in the human body works. Your brain doesn't. You remember, nothing works like a machine, and everything has to be translatable to your human experiences at the end of the day. So you can have the most beautifully written piece of music, but if it sounds bad, it sounds bad. And sometimes people get lost, I think, in like the analysis and the writing and the logic and the rationale. It's like, well, what does this sound like or feel like at the end of the day to you? Because really, that's the most important thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's I'm learning a lot because I think this is also something that I struggle to help people understand, right? So sometimes when you're working with someone, they focus a lot, like for example, like people who are super like into red pill or take whatever thing people believe, right? This is religion, economy, tacos or burritos, like whatever.
Sure.
And they'll think that they'll use a lot of logic in their mind, but I think a lot of people don't recognize that logic can be hijacked by other parts of your brain.
Yeah.
Especially your emotions, and especially even more so than emotions, your ego. So when your ego becomes active, the problem isn't that you're illogical. The problem is that you're selectively logical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you laughed. What, something coming to mind?
There's just, do you have any poker history or background or whatever?
No. I mean, I know how to play the game, but
sure. If you know a lot of math for poker, there's like, you can do like implied odds. You can make really stupid decisions, but you could find ways to mathematically justify it. Like ordinarily this would be a really bad call, but if I hit my hand, the implied odds and the fact that I know this guy's going to go blah, blah, you can start to justify crazy things. And logically it kind of makes sense on paper, but if you take a step back, you're like, okay, hold on. How often is this actually going to happen? What are you doing right now? Like, yeah, you can find yourself justifying insanely stupid things. And logically it kind of makes sense, but I 100% understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that a lot in addictions. Where if you look at the brain of someone who's like addicted, I don't know, my brain isn't really fair, but if you look at the thinking of someone who is addictive, I kind of use this term addicted brain. So like your addicted brain will like convince you. It'll use some weird permutations of logic to just get what it needs. Like it wants that substance, for substances especially. I find this to be more potent for substances than behavioral addictions or even tech addiction. But it'll like, justify all kinds of like thinking in order to get what it wants.
Yeah. One thing that I found is this happens with eating and it happens with gym, where if you, oh my God, you can wake up and there can be so many good reasons to eat poorly, to not work out. There are a billion reasons. And sometimes what I used to do that I found kind of helpful was like after I would do a thing, I would like write a note in my phone. Am I allowed to swear here?
I think so.
Yeah. The note would say something along the lines of like, you just finished working out. You didn't want to do it. do it right now, you fucking moron. Okay. And every now and then I'm like, okay, well, it's 11:30. I got to stream at 1. Like, I've only got like, do I kind of really, and sometimes I would like open and I was like, okay, well, how did I feel the last time I did this? Like, you've never, it's like the age old saying of like, there has never been a time in all of human history where a person went to the gym when they weren't really feeling like it. And then they came home thinking like, wow, I really shouldn't have went to the gym. You always feel better doing it. Same thing with eating healthy or any other thing. But if the logical process is prior to doing a thing, yeah, you can find so many reasons not to do a particular thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's so interesting because I just filmed a lecture about this, but like there's this super cool concept from neuroscience called intentional binding. So I don't know if you're familiar with some of the. I've been looking a lot into like biological determinism recently.
Okay, that's kind of scary. Yeah.
Huh?
It was a little scary, but yeah, go ahead.
What's scary about that? I'm confused by your reaction.
Oh, sorry. Philosophically, biological determinism sounds like it could have a lot of scary crossovers with other things that people don't like to talk about, with the idea that your biology heavily predisposes you towards like preordained paths through time and space that are scary, and a lot of people. Yeah, that's. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with like Robert Sapolsky's work, but
yes, I've watched the whole. Yes, very very cool lecture.
Right.
Yes.
So a lot of prominent neuroscientists are big into biological reductionism. Anyway, so I was looking into biological reductionism and trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So I dug into a lot of neuroscience, and I was looking at some of these experiments that they actually talk about. Where like you can sort of look at blood flow in the brain, and you can predict with greater than random chance which. Like if there's a button and I can press it with my right hand or my left hand, and I ask someone, tell us when you decide which hand you're going to use. So before you press the button, you have to say, okay, I've decided I'm going to press it with my right hand, or I've decided I'm going to press it with my left hand. And what they've found is that they can actually predict based on blood flow of the brain in the brain, which hand you're going to use before you're even aware of it. So people will use these kinds of studies as arguments for the support of biological determinism.
Sure.
The really interesting thing is, as I looked into it, I like stumbled upon some really like revolutionary research about something called intentional binding, which is what results in the repeat of an action. And the crazy thing about this is that we'll say like, okay, like we think that our actions are determined by the outcomes. So the reward that we get from our action is very deterministic as to whether we do it or not, right? So like if I do something and I get a reward, I'll do it again. If I don't do something and I don't get a reward, I won't do it. That's the common understanding. The really interesting thing is if you look at the science of intentional binding, there are a few things that will increase the likelihood of repeating your action, even if the action doesn't work out. The really interesting thing is that this will increase the likelihood that you repeat the action irrespective of the reward. So people have done rewards where studies where there's zero reward or there's no difference in the reward depending on how you act. And one of them is literally reflecting after you complete the action. So even if you went to the gym and you say to yourself, this was awful, I never want to do it again, your likelihood to go to the gym will actually increase. Simply the act of reflection afterward improves the likelihood of behavior.
Okay. Yeah, that's to go back to the poker thing. There are times when you have to kind of in poker you have to completely divorce yourself. Truly, this is true of all of life. You should technically always divorce yourself from the results of a given thing, because what you really want to say is every analysis that you do of any particular thing is always perspective. We can never retrospectively analyze a decision we have to make in the future. And sometimes you'll make a bad decision, but you'll get rewarded for it, and that will increase the likelihood of making that bad decision in the future. Really common example of this is DUI, or not DUI. Just not getting caught, but just driving drunk. Yeah. People will do it, and you don't get in an accident. And so you kind of think in the future, like, oh, okay, yeah, I think we can do this. And because they didn't get the negative outcome from the driving drunk once, and the result was good, they got home, they didn't have to pay for a cab. They're like, oh, okay, I'll do this again. And the same thing happens in poker, where you might play a hand really stupidly, but you get saved because of the last card that falls in the river. And you're like, okay, yeah, you know what? Actually, I think I will do this. This is good. Or you make a really good decision, but then they get really lucky. You're like, oh, I'm never going to do this again. I'll never play aces. People say things like that. Yeah, you have to divorce the results, which feels very inhuman. It's not what we normally do. Usually we're very results oriented, but you really have to completely divorce the results when you're trying to figure out if you made a good or bad decision. That can be really, really difficult for people to do.
So that's a big aspect of certain spiritual beliefs from like Eastern. When I say Eastern, I mean primarily Hindu and Buddhist traditions. And then that's also something that we work really hard to train out of ourselves in medicine. So right? Because like you can give someone the right treatment and they can die.
Yeah.
But you don't want to. So there are lots of studies that show that overcorrecting for mistakes in the practice of medicine can result in bad outcomes over time. There's a very important bias where, if you do something and like someone has a heart attack, like that doesn't mean that you made a mistake.
Yeah.
But in the brain of a physician, we will weight that thing as more negative than it really deserves to be, which is part of what we do in this M&M conference, which is like, you sit down and you talk through things, and this thing happened bad, but it doesn't mean, just because something bad happened doesn't mean that you made a mistake.
Yeah.
We also see that in gaming. I mean, that's why I was, 1,000 MMR
true.
for so long.
Yeah, I would lose so
Where
many games, and it wasn't my mistake. It was the mistakes of my teammates every single time.
I see this a lot, especially with like win more strategies. So like there's like in Dota, there's like a greedy build that you can do where you make an item. I don't know if there's something equivalent in LoL where you make an item that gives you more money. So you're investing a lot, and you basically dump all this money to like make more money, which is fine if you're like an ADC or something. But sometimes greedy supports will build it, and then like what happens is in the few games that pays off. Like in some games, you just get rolled because instead of having like a useful item, you have this like economy dump.
Yeah.
But in the few games where the game runs long and the item pays off, it feels so good. It's like, oh my God, if I hadn't built this item, I would have nothing right now. But it like helps you make a comeback. And there's a lot of biases in like how people play video games.
Yeah. Yeah, any game that has some kind of resources usually has, this is true of probably every single RTS and true of every single MOBA, where you can opt for strategies that let you build kind of like for longer term, but you could get destroyed in the beginning, or you could opt for things that are really strong in the beginning, and if you don't win early, it's like, oh God, this is going to be a miserable 45-minute game. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Stephen, I have 3 different threads that I'm kind of interested in like, I'm curious if one resonates with you.
Okay.
One is you mentioned dismissive avoidant attachment. I was curious what you meant by that.
Okay.
Second thing is, you were sort of talking about plateaus and performance. Like you'll kind of like grind for a while and there's a spike. And it just reminded me of this concept that I first learned. I mean, I think that's generally true scientifically, but that I learned when I was learning Tantra, and I was given my mantra, which is that my guru told me that. So like doing a mantra, so there's this idea that like when you chant a mantra, you're manifesting the powers of the universe and whatnot, all that good stuff. And that the way that he described it to me is like kind of like irrigating a field, where you start at the field and let's say there's water. And so you exert some effort. Like if you, let's say the river is 100 feet away from the field. And then I dig my first foot, and then there's no water in my field. Dig the second foot, the third foot, the fourth foot, the fifth foot. I can dig 98 feet of this ditch and irrigate 0%. And then once I dig that final foot, then suddenly 1 foot is worth complete irrigation.
Okay.
So this idea of like, grinding, and then there's a spike. So that concept I was like that popped into my head. And then the third thing was I was really curious about, I got excited about your like the philosophical implications of biological determinism, because it sounds like you've looked into that. I'm just curious what you think. Do any of these, and if you've got other stuff you want to talk about, I'm more than happy to. Those are just the 3 things that I got curious about as we've been talking.
Yeah, I mean, we can run down any of these 3, all 3, whatever you want to do. Yeah. What
do you want to do?
Yeah, we can. I like talking to you, so I'd talk about all 3 of them. We can go. Okay. We can go backwards to forwards, because I think that would probably be shortest topics to longest topics, maybe.
Okay.
The biological determinism is an uncomfortable subject, mainly because of people call it race realism, but essentially there are very controversial ideas in the non-academic world and in the academic world that basically questions how much mean IQ differences between groups is related to these kind of like inherent, genetically determined, heritable traits related to G or intelligence. And I think that there's a lot of people are scared to venture into that world to ask questions, which means that a lot of the people that do venture into that world to ask questions have very strong thoughts about them that aren't always like scientifically based, but more politically or personally motivated, which is a little bit disappointing. But I think there's a lot of yeah, I mean, on a personal level and on a societal level, it can be scary to think of how much your upshot might be limited by some kind of like biological container. Like, is it possible that I could never do a particular thing because I'm limited so much? Personally, I fall a lot more on the environmental side. I think almost anybody can achieve really high in a lot of areas, given like adequate training and everything. But yeah, that was just kind of, when you brought that up, that was my thoughts on that. Is that's a very, very, very controversial area. Yeah.
That's so interesting because I hadn't tracked onto those concerns. So this is also because of my background and what circles I run in. But when you say so, I don't think biological determinism is genetic.
Okay.
So I think this is like really an important distinction. So when you say it's more environment, I think that's absolutely the case. So here's my understanding of some things, and these may be wrong. The first is that mean IQ is much more variable within a population than it is between populations. So you can take any ethnicity. Like the reason that everyone in the United States thinks that Asians are smart is not because Asians are smarter. And I remember my first day, my intern orientation at residency at Massachusetts General Hospital, like 30% of the room was like South Asian. And I was like stunned. Like I walked in and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like there's so many brown people here. And what it is it's a selection bias. So there's like
sure.
1 billion people in India, and the ones that ended up emigrating to the United States are people who have a certain, like not even IQ, but they have a certain like professional capability. There's a huge selection bias. And I think we have tons of studies that show that one race is not smarter than another race, or one ethnicity is not smarter than the inter-ethnic variation far outweighs the intra-ethnic variation far outweighs the inter-ethnic variation. Second thing is that biological determinism, I don't think, is talking about primarily genetics. I think what their point is that if you look at human behavior can be tracked back to neuronal activity. And neuronal activity,
never mind. Okay, hold on. I just completely understood. When you're talking about biological determinism, you're almost like wrestling with this kind of like dualist thought of or like, how do we trace where human behavior comes from? Does it originate in some other place, like a soul or an abstract consciousness or whatever?
Yeah.
Or is it, okay. Now, when I think determinism, I think of like path. So like, are you a hard determinist? Are you a soft determinist? I'm thinking like philosophically on that path. And when you say biological determinism, I'm thinking like a deterministic path from birth based on biological characteristics.
No.
Okay, forget that whole thing.
I mean,
I understand. I gotcha.
You can make that argument sort of, but I think that like what we're talking about here is that like, so let's say like you look at someone who commits a crime. So there are philosophical implications because like if you look at that moment where they commit the crime, their neurons are activating in a certain way. Do they really have the exercise of choice, right? So this is where like, does choice exist? And if you say that choice, what is the manifestation of choice? Is there some consciousness, or is choice simply another part of your brain where neurons are undergoing action potentials? Because those neurons undergoing action potentials are also somewhat deterministic. There's some randomness to it, but it's not like the person controls the randomness. Basically, you have a bunch of like sodium and potassium, literally sodium and potassium ions that are floating around between two cells. And if enough sodium ions touch and not enough potassium ions, and if there's a balance between the two, if the balance tips a certain way, the neuron will activate. If the neuron activates, then it'll cascade down to these things. And so does a human being really have control over their actions, or is the control of their actions an illusion? That is actually still, and then this is where environment shapes all of those biological things, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like it was a lot of what you reacted to was a different understanding of the term, which I think could be fair because maybe I'm using the wrong one. I don't know.
No, it's fine. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Second thing was plateaus and breaking through plateaus.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Any
experience, the music thing comes up again, and then I think in StarCraft it was the same, is it feels like as a human when you're practicing or training at something, you tend not to make like kind of a little bit of progress, and then you'll have these little spurts of growth where maybe you've been practicing, chromatic scales or playing sevens or whatever, and you're kind of like improving a little bit, and then for whatever reason, like one day it just like really clicks and you're just like killing it, and you bump your metronome up, 8 or 9 points, and you're just so much more in the zone. It feels like a lot of human improvement is that way. I don't know why, but yeah.
Okay. And then third thing was dismissive avoidant.
Yeah, I'm a hugely dismissive avoidant person. I'm trying.
What does that mean?
I feel like I have a very aggressive, like obviously public facing persona. So for debates, for Twitter, for everything else, I feel like personally, I have a very, very hard time asking for things, making criticisms, having confrontations with people. Like my MO is usually to just like, I'll just avoid this person until they go away, or like or figure out a particular thing myself and not like make any asks or requests of some other person. I have a really hard time doing that with people. I don't know why. It's very annoying.
Is that something you want to talk about?
If you want to, sure, yeah.
What do you want to talk about? So I've offered 3 topics.
True, you're right.
We don't have to.
We can talk about that. Yeah, sure. That's probably like the biggest area of my life that I need to. Hold on. You've asked me like 3 times. Do I want to talk about it? I keep saying we can talk about that. Yeah, I would like to talk about that. Yeah.
Can I think for a second?
Yeah.
So is this interaction right here a manifestation of what you're talking about?
Yeah, a little bit. Instead of me giving a direct like, hey, I would like to talk about this, I'm letting you take the wheel, and I'm like, cool to go along with whatever. Yes.
So you are indicating, because I feel actually like so yeah, so much. I mean, so I think let's talk about it. But if I can share just my experience of this. So first thing is you said like let's talk about these in reverse order because, like the earlier one will take longer. I was confused by that because I was actually assuming the opposite.
Oh.
That dismissive avoidant would be a quick conversation, and then we would like get into this deep philosophical discussion about biological determinism that would last an hour.
Oh, well, the other 2 are easier one. This is a huge personal problem I have in my life that I think I've had probably for my entire life. So it's the thing that impacts me the most right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second thing was I wasn't quite sure, like, I was a little bit confused about the direction, but now I think I understand because I was feeling like I have to give you options of things to talking about, and it felt very strange because usually our conversation doesn't go into like this kind of stuff. So, yeah. So it sounds like you. And why do you think this is dismissive avoidant attachment?
Oh, I don't know. I've read through some of the attachment styles, and I just kind of like meme on that one. I don't actually know which one it would map onto, if it would be insecure, or whatever. I have no idea.
So it sounds like you have difficulty with confrontation in real life, asking for help.
Yeah, those 2 things. Yeah. Well, not
you said
the confrontation is more specific. Like I have no problems like fighting with people. I just have problems asking for things or giving expectations on things is very difficult for me. Yeah.
What do you mean by expectations?
Like if I feel like somebody is like failing to do a certain thing, or if I feel like somebody's like treating me kind of poorly, I have a really hard time like making a request like, hey, chill, like establishing boundaries, like stuff like that.
What makes that hard for you?
Man, I don't know. I've thought about it a lot. It feels like it comes from a place of insecurity, because that would be my default assumption is like, okay, well, you don't want to ask a person this because you think they'll say no, but it doesn't really make sense. And I don't necessarily think it does. I don't feel insecure about the friends that I have. So then I was thinking maybe it comes from a place of independence, and that like, well, I feel like I'd rather just do this myself, but you can't do everything yourself, so that's not very like reasonable. Then I wondered if maybe it comes from a place of like unreliability. Like I feel like if I do ask somebody for another thing, that it's not I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I truly don't know. I bounce between a lot of these things sometimes, and I don't know 100% why. Because it seems like a really easy, stupid thing to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to say that there is potentially an easy thing that we can learn about how the mind functions that maybe would actually help you quite a bit.
Okay.
Let me. I have an idea. Or I guess I can say it now. So I think that I see this a lot with people who are actually highly intelligent and have like done a lot of self-development work, where you're looking for a answer, but I think it's an issue of state, not trait. So like here's what I'm envisioning, right? So you're like looking at yourself, oh, like so if I have difficulty asking for help or like setting boundaries, like that, many people that involves insecurity, right?
Yeah.
And so then you look in yourself and you're like, am I insecure? And you're like, well, no, I'm not insecure. Right? So then it's confusing. Like that's not the answer. And then you're like, okay, maybe it's about independence. Like, I'm not quite sure what you meant, but let's just assume for a moment that you don't want to be dependent on anyone else. So You don't ask them for help, and you want to cultivate your own independence. But you're relatively independent. So it's like, am I a dependent human being? No. So then it's like kind of confusing, right? Because you'll come up with hypotheses, you'll do a logical analysis, and then you find that that hypothesis doesn't really track. Would you say that that is a faithful representation of your exploration of this?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, obviously, I try to think of it like multi-factor. Like, well, maybe it's different for some people, or maybe, maybe there's like a combination of things. But it doesn't get me any closer. It's more the same thing you're saying, but I might think of like two things at a time, or maybe it's a combination of things, but I still don't. Yeah.
No. But see, the point there is that you're thinking that there is a static answer instead of fluctuations within the mind. So insecurity, when you describe it, it sounds like a static quantity.
Okay.
Like you play D&D, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have an insecurity stat. It's like it's a static number that does not fluctuate. So in my experience of like really understanding the mind, a lot of what confuses people is that they don't occupy the same mind the whole time. The mind itself changes. And then an insecurity will be dormant and then will arise and then will go dormant again. So you can look at your average security and you can say, oh, like this person is very secure with themselves. And it kind of makes sense, right? You can take someone who's very, very confident and stuff like that, and you can stick them in the one situation where like their insecurity is exposed and then like they feel super insecure.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I'm aware of this in other areas. When people talk to me about like, do you think I should be a streamer or a YouTuber or whatever? Usually my go-to is make sure that when you evaluate this particular thing, you keep in mind that when you're evaluating it, usually you evaluate it from a very happy state, but you need to think of like, if you're miserable or depressed or upset, you also have to be ready to function in that state too. So I guess, yeah, I'm aware conceptually of this, but I guess I don't really apply it to myself as much. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So let's, you want to tunnel down further?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So let's talk about our interaction.
Okay.
So when I asked you, what do you want to talk about? You kind of keep saying whatever I want to talk about. Do you have a sense of what's going on in you internally when you say that?
Yeah, I don't know why. I feel like I feel like I have a sense of like wasting your time, I guess. Which seems kind of stupid.
Yeah.
That's so like going from shortest topic to longest topic means that we can cover the most ground basically. So we can get through at least this and that if you want to. Yeah. I guess maybe that's like the internal sense or whatever.
Yeah. So wasting my time. So how do you feel about me?
Like in general or specific to that or?
Yeah. Like what comes up when I ask you that question?
The first thing, I think you're one of the best conversationalists I've ever seen. I think I've told you that privately and I've said that a lot publicly. I think you're really good. At the Sneako conversation was really, really well done. You're probably the best.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it was an amazing conversation to see you take somebody who's so hostile and in like 2 minutes you're like just so on their side and I don't even think they realize. Yeah, it's just very, very, very good at that. Yeah.
Okay.
I also think I think you're very genuine. I haven't, I've never heard or seen or witnessed anything different. So I think there's another issue that I have is that rationally, if I'm exploring a topic. Maybe it's a lack of trust. If I ask you to talk about something that you don't want to talk about or that you feel like would be a waste of time, I think you would say it. Rationally, I know that, but I guess emotionally, I don't feel that way. Maybe I have an issue with feeling like other people might just be humoring me. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Is this a common experience? So this is a common experience you have with other people, right?
Yeah, I think I'm usually like socially, I think I'm a big people pleaser. Like I'm very good at like kind of orienting things in directions that make other people happy or that people enjoy. So conversationally or socially, yeah, I'm very good at that. But then I have a harder time staring in my direction, yeah, or I just don't.
I do this with caution. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that talking to you felt different today.
Okay.
Like I didn't feel like until now we were actually like had a good flow. It felt like the questions we covered a lot of topics. We were like boom, 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 boom. It's like, let's have it like, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. So it felt to me like there was some kind of other layer as opposed to like in the past, we'll just like kind of vibe. And I hadn't felt that. And I please don't take that as a criticism, okay. But I think this is maybe what we were kind of stumbling into. Because I do, and maybe it was the same in the past, but I felt like I was dealing with some kind of internal objective in your mind in our conversation.
Okay.
That I couldn't tease apart. And so what's your understanding of why you're a people pleaser?
I don't know. I mean, it's incredibly beneficial. Hopefully in a non-manipulative way. Like, I think people that spend a lot of time talking to me personally, I think I do really, really well in almost all social interactions. I have since like a pretty early age, at least from high school and onwards, where I've really thought about social interactions. So it seems to have like well, I guess as all maladaptive behavior do. In some regards, it has a lot of benefits to it. And that I feel like I can talk to a really huge variety of people and leave a very positive impression in most people's minds.
When did you learn that that's important?
Around high school, for sure.
Can you tell me about high school?
I don't know. It's hard to imagine. But I feel like the way that I process interactions and emotions is like is a little bit off, or sometimes non-existent. It's hard to tell. But I noticed in probably early high school that the way that I talk to people, or the way that I prefer to be communicated with, is not the way that other people prefer to be communicated with. So there would be how to have warm conversations, how to pay attention to somebody, how to use somebody's name in a conversation, how to remember certain details and like bring them up, and like for caring about people and all these are like a lot of things that I had to focus and think about and learn, because for me they meant absolutely nothing, and usually they were irritating or I didn't like them, but for other people they were really important. So I think I started to track a lot of that more in early high school and then onwards for social interactions. That sounds really sociopathic. I hope that made sense. Sorry.
I think it made a lot of sense.
Okay, gotcha.
That didn't sound sociopathic to me at all.
Okay, that's good. All right. I tried to talk to a high school teacher about this, and that's what he told me. And I was like, okay, never mind. Yeah.
Your high school teacher told you that's sociopathic?
Or he felt that it was something that I would grow out of, and it just seemed very weird. Like I remember one of my biggest complaints growing up was like the idea of I lived with my grandma when I was 16 and onwards, and the idea of like her staying up and waiting for me was literally the most irritating thing in the entire world. And I tried to explain that like the idea of having somebody waiting for me to come back, like just go to sleep, whether I'm dead or not, it's not gonna make a difference if you stay up or not. And the fact that you're just waiting on me is driving me crazy. And I think I explained that concept, and he was like, oh, well, that seems like a very insensitive thing to say, and most people would appreciate that, and blah. And I was like, okay, whatever, yeah.
Tough to imagine, but easy to remember.
Tough to imagine
with high school.
Oh, yeah.
I asked you about high school, and you said it's tough to imagine. But I mean, that's so interesting. Like, what do you remember? What irritated you about your grandmother staying up for you?
What irritated me, man? What? I think I'm just a very, 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 very independent person. Like, I just want to be, it's funny, I guess, because it's kind of manifested in my streamer life to where when I started to become popular as a streamer, social events and cons and stuff were very stressful, because I'd be getting messages. It was like, oh, everybody's waiting for you and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, holy shit. Like, I guess it's manifested in relationships as well, where I don't want to feel like a sole source of entertainment or whatever for a person. So for cons, I would start telling people like, listen, if I show up, okay, it'll just be a happy accident and we'll all have fun, but don't rely on me. I'm not going to be anywhere. I'm not making plans. Who knows if I'll show up or not. And then, I guess for grandma stuff, I just kind of want to be out there doing my own thing. And the idea there's like somebody waiting for me that's like getting stressed because I'm not in the right place at the right time, in my mind, was like very, very, very stressful. Maybe it's because earlier for my parents, they didn't keep track of me at all. So maybe I just kind of grew up with that feeling very independent, but yeah.
You don't want people to care for you?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Sounds like it.
Maybe it's because I think it stems from a place of not being genuine. Maybe. So growing up, I started to choose things to do because I really liked doing them, and I didn't need my parents to like sign off on things. So, for instance, for band, so music was a big part of my life in high school, and I think I think it was just my dad, I think was left, might have showed up at one concert, and I was irritated when he showed up because I was like, why are you even here? I don't think you even care about this. Like, I don't need you to be here to like come and like clap for me or whatever. Like, I'm doing this because I like to do it, and I don't need you here to like be here one time to show that you're just like, yeah, like that, like just the idea of that, just drove me crazy. But I don't know why. I don't know if that's very rational or not, or if that's just like kind of part of my.
How often would your dad come and clap for you?
Very rarely. But they were my parents worked, and there was a lot of stuff going on there.
So how do you understand, what is the advantage? Damn it, Destiny.
What?
Damn it, Steve. Nothing. We're getting in. What's the advantage to? What do you think the child gains by not needing their parent to clap for them?
You want just the pros? You want the pros and the cons?
I want the pros.
The pros are an incredibly high sense, assuming that you go in the right direction. The pros would be an incredibly high sense of internal drive, probably a high degree of resilience with lack of public support, hopefully a lot of like self-confidence or self-esteem because you don't need the external validation, I guess, to push through things. Probably ability to pursue projects like on your own or with more responsibility yourself. These are things I hope. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to add one more to the list.
Oh boy.
The answer that I was looking for.
Oh,
which
shit,
is that
okay.
if you don't need him to clap for you, if you don't need him to clap for you that one day, that also means it doesn't hurt when he doesn't show up the other 9.
Yeah.
Right. So like all this internal drive and becoming a better person and independent, like I think that's actually down, like that's like further down that's distal to
Second,
what
third
I
order.
think-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Right. So I think those are, I can see how those adaptations like that strive for independence, but basically it's like, if I don't feel good when you say yay, I don't feel bad when you say nay.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's like protecting yourself from hurt by not caring about other people, because if you care about other people, like then they can hurt you.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Although it seems like at this point I feel like kind of insulated from that ever being the case. But maybe because there's not like enough of an...
Except when you're
yeah.
asking for help in your relationships, setting boundaries, and that's what I think is confusing about it.
Oh,
right?
sure.
So now-
Okay, yeah.
Right. So this is the whole thing is like you've grown into a grown Stephen who is confident, independent, and capable. And within you, there's a 15-year-old Stephen who's not. And the analogy that I used with one of my patients is, so one of my patients was very successful in the field of finance. And they were at one of the top firms and they were doing very well by all objective standards. But every once in a while, they would like really struggle to like feel confident. We were trying to figure out where that comes from. And the analogy that we came up with is that there's a bumbling idiot that's in the basement. This is like a dumbass that you keep trapped down there, like you don't let him out. And every once in a while, like he'll sneak out of the basement and he's like in your house and he's bumbling around and he's an idiot. And that's kind of what would happen in his mind, is that this old thing would come up and like control the way that he perceives the world, control the way that he feels. And he hated this person so much. So he tried to keep him locked in the basement as much as possible.
Okay.
Does that resonate with you at all?
No, but I feel like, I guess... the biggest worry I have is that if you have somebody locked in the basement, maybe you don't know it. Maybe you drown the sound out. I spend a great deal of time, or try to, like going through the ways that I relate to people or the ways that I associate with people, and it's really hard to pick out sometimes. Like, is this a maladaptive behavior that I need to change, or is this a behavior that is just like serving me so well in life that I shouldn't change it? Or yeah, I think we might have even had a conversation almost related to this like a few years ago, where like I've kind of tried to change something, and I kind of like, no, I don't think so. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to figure out what should change or shouldn't.
Yeah, so I think that's not how this is going to... So this is... I think this is a great conversation because that's how a lot of people approach these problems, right? It's like, is this good or is this bad on balance? I don't think that's the right angle.
Okay.
So I don't think it should change or shouldn't change. I think it will change if you work on it. It'll disappear. Is that a good thing for your life or a bad thing for your life? I think on balance, it will lead to more peace. And I would say also, if you look at like an RCT of 10,000 people, it'll lead to performance improvement in most of them. In your case, I'm not sure, because this oftentimes in very successful people, they have these kinds of psychological drivers that are internally painful, but lead to external success.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever worked with someone who has regretted improving this, even though it costs them some amount of drive. And what I actually find is that the drive doesn't really deplete. It just comes from a different place and is almost always healthy. Like I said, I can't think of a single case of someone who is like, I wish I still had this, whatever it is. So I would use the Sanskrit term samskar.
Okay.
which is like a ball of undigested emotional energy that lies like dormant in your mind. So yeah, any thoughts?
No, not yet. I think
Okay.
I've heard
I
this.
can keep
Yeah,
going.
I've heard similar before. You might have even told me this before in the past that like this is something that's worth, figuring out. I think it kind of is to some extent. I guess it also depends exactly on what we're talking about too. Like my issue on the applied, on the most abstract level was, or the least abstract level, I guess, is being able to make requests of people, which seems very hard for me. And you're saying that you believe that this stems from an over reliance of self, or not trust in other people, or not wanting to be let down from other people. Am I summarizing that correctly? Or tell me, yeah.
Sort of. So I think there's more to tease apart, but
Sure.
like basically like, so here's what the signs are, right? So
Okay.
let's forget about you for a second.
Sure.
But like, I asked you about high school and what came out. This very vivid story about your grandmother.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so that implies to us, like, let's take a step back from helping you with anything and just understand, like, how can we understand the mind? Like, when I ask you about high school and some memory pops out, that's significant,
Okay.
right? That speaks to the size of whatever is down there.
Yeah. I agree.
And so there's one angle of that, but there's two or three angles here.
Mm-hmm.
One is that, like, you don't want people to care for you. You find it irritating.
Yeah.
And why would you be irritated? My guess is that, right, so you can absolve yourself of the whole thing. Like, I don't want you to care about me because then it doesn't hurt when you stop caring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather trade feeling good when you care about me. I'm happy to give that up as long as I can get rid of the hurt too. And if you sort of think about it, right, so like and you can probably, I'm sure you did, make some logical argument that, and you even shared it with us, like, whether I'm dead or alive, like, it doesn't have to cost you sleep.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is, like, objectively and logically, it's very true. It's also absurd. Right? So my next question is,
Yeah, well, yeah, it's stupid because obviously people don't stay awake thinking they're going to intervene when something happens to you. It's because they're worried and they will sleep easier knowing that you come home safe. Yeah.
and is it okay? Like, so, and then I'm sure in some part of your mind, you're like, worrying less is better than worrying more.
I mean, not necessarily. I guess it depends on what we're talking about.
So, like, what's wrong with your grandmother worrying about you if you're out?
I'm technically nothing, I guess, other than it makes me feel weird. I guess. Yeah, there's not really anything wrong with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, of course there is. Well, what feels weird about it?
Well, it's irritating to me that now instead of just keeping track of myself, now I also have to keep track of somebody else's feelings about where I'm at. So now I'm like managing multiple people's stuff when I'm trying to, I guess, like live my life. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
Right? So what I hear there is a lot of responsibility for other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I usually don't I don't want to be. Yeah.
Do you find yourself being responsible even though you don't want to be?
I can do it pretty well, but when it's not related to me, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So in my prior relationship, she might have even spoken to you about this. I might have spoken to you about this. Like a big issue that I would have is that, like, if you've got a problem or you've got an issue or something that's really bothering you, I can help you with literally anything. But if your issue is with me, I have a really hard time dealing with that because it's a different type of thing. Yeah. So if somebody wants to
What's
complain, like,
different
go ahead. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So what's different about it?
What's different about it? I guess it's demanding from me behavioral change that I feel like isn't worth it, I guess. So in the grandma example, it would be like, do I need to start coming home 2 hours earlier and then sacrifice anything that I want to do tonight because it assuages your worry? That feels like a behavioral change that I have to make that's being dictated to me by somebody else's, what I would feel like are irrational feelings, I guess. That sounds really cold or dumb.
Where does that self-judgment of your stuff come from? I'm so.
What do you mean by self-judgment? Or what
like
stuff?
so you do this thing where it's you don't do this often, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So when we talk about other things, you'll oftentimes add caveats, but they're not personally directed. right? So you'll say like, oh, like I have this belief, but it's very possible that like other people don't have this belief. So you're very good at caveating, but the caveating isn't about you. In this case, you frequently judge the way that you see your thoughts as cold or dumb.
Yeah, I guess the issue is that I feel like my internal drivers, when I'm talking about my relationships with other people, or my relation to other people and the behaviors and everything, I make statements from my perspective, but I think I've spent so much time in my life kind of trying to pull those back or realize that like, I think this thing, but this is not normal. So I have to be aware of that. So I'm just trying to like peg that. So when I say it, it's probably that. I think that's just what's coming out.
This is subtle. Okay. So that's why I recognize your useful ability to second guess your thoughts.
Yeah. A really big manifestation of that would be I have a really hard problem with compliments for somebody I've been with for a long time. So if my partner compliments me, my immediate thought in my mind is like my partner might say like, "Oh, I think you look very handsome," and I'm thinking like, "Yeah, no shit, we're dating. Of course you think I'm handsome. Why? I don't need you to say that." But I know that's a stupid thought. It's not really a stupid thought, but I know that in the other person's mind, you want to hear like compliments and stuff from your partner because it makes you feel good, because it reminds them of how they feel about you. Like, but so I'll have a thought, but I know that it's a very like not ordinary thought. I say it's stupid. Maybe I should just say it's not ordinary, or other people don't think like this. So I can't project that. Is I think what I'm doing. I think when I'm caveating or when I'm hedging or when I'm self-judging, I'm just saying I'm trying not to project it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Go
okay.
for it.
Like this is.
Sorry.
Because I love you, bro.
Yeah.
This is going to make you sound stupid.
Okay.
But
yeah,
I'm
go
going
for
to
it.
ask you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I recognize. Okay. So first thing is when someone. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. So when someone has difficulty with compliments in some circumstances, when someone calls what they think and what they feel dumb or cold, do you think that tracks onto insecurity? Like, is that consistent with someone who is insecure in some dimension?
If somebody says that they're uncomfortable receiving compliments, you're asking me if it tracks with insecurity?
And if they judge their thoughts as dumb or cold, when they feel or act or think a particular way, and they judge those thoughts in that way, do you think that tracks with insecurity? Those are the three things.
I think it could. I would have to see what the self-judgment looks like. When I say that, to reiterate what I said before, when I say that something is dumb, or I shouldn't say this, I shouldn't think this, I'm not thinking that like, God, I'm so stupid for having this feeling. When I say that, what I'm thinking is that like, I understand that I think about these things in this way, but it's very abnormal, and I have to be aware of that, because if I start projecting that onto other people, people are gonna have really bad impressions of me. Yeah. Or have a very bad, I'm not gonna be communicating accurately what I feel about somebody if I act the way that I would have somebody act towards me. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. So this is where like we also get into a weird space, because respectfully, I disagree.
Okay.
I think that what I feel from you is that is what you said is absolutely correct. I think that is what has built on top of a kernel of something else.
Okay.
So I think this has been absolutely adaptive for you, but like it's weird to hear you say this, and maybe this is my perception that's messed up, right? Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but like it's so weird to hear you say that's dumb, that's dumb, that's dumb, because you don't usually talk like that. You're not usually so black and white. You're quite nuanced, right? So you'll talk about the shortcomings in your thought process quite frequently.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah,
But
like I said, I
usually
think it's
those-
part of what we said before. I try to be like very aware of like where my thought process sits in the world, and I try to like caveat or hedge. Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying.
So what I would encourage you to do is take a step back from that and listen to the music.
Okay.
Right. So like take a step back from like analyzing your thought process, and like now I'll ask you. So now we'll pick a new topic, right? So like try to listen to the music.
Okay.
What is it like to be responsible for the feelings of others? What is it like to be someone who can create worry or take it away? To create happiness or sadness? What is it
I'm
like
trying to think
have
more.
people...
The first thing that pops into my head is just stressful, usually.
So stressful is an umbrella term
Okay.
that is commonly used when people are somewhat alexithymic, which means colorblind to their internal emotional state.
Okay.
Like I get that it's stressful. Of course it's stressful.
You're
But what
asking
is
me
the
why it's
nature of
stressful?
that stress? When you get a text that a bunch of people are waiting for you at a con, how do you feel?
I think that the stressful part of that is usually the idea that there's like a thing that people want me to do that I don't really think I want to do it because I don't think it would be very enjoyable or very much fun for me. But I know that if I don't show up, a bunch of people are going to be like very upset or very unhappy. So then the stressful part is that there's like there's a branching path where I can make a decision that would be fun for me or would make me happy. But if I make that one, a bunch of people are going to be upset or disappointed or whatever. Or I can make the other decision, which is going to be irritating to me, but it would make all the other people happy. So I think that dichotomy is something that is what results in the stressful feeling. Is that not deep enough, or is that too abstract still? Or
yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about.
Okay, sorry. Gotcha.
No. It's good. It's good. Sorry, I could be doing this better for sure.
No, you're fine.
So look at you protecting my feelings.
No, shut up. You don't even protect your fucking feelings, okay? Fuck off. You're not fine, okay? I feel very upset now, okay?
Okay. Look at you when I call attention to the fact that you're doing something kind for me, laughing it off and tell.
Yeah, I can't ever accept compliments. Yeah, that's like a horrible, stupid. Yeah, it's really bad. It's
hard,
really stupid. Yeah,
it?
It makes me very uncomfortable. I don't know why. This is a really dumb thing as well. Yeah.
You did it again.
Yeah, because I should be able to accept the compliment. I don't know why I can't. It's very stupid.
Should be able to.
Yeah, I should be able to. Yeah, without it feeling weird.
What makes it hard?
I truly have no idea. It's like it's a super like that's like hitting my knee and asking me why I just kicked you. Right? It's like a very reflexive thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Are you? Is this conversation okay?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. You would be able to tell me if it wasn't, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'm trusting you there, okay? I can't
No, I understand, yeah. I don't think I've ever had a conversation that I'm not okay with, so it's hard for me to imagine if you would bring up something that was okay. But I think I would just say, like, yeah, we should talk about this offline. I think I trust you that if I wanted to talk about something offline, I think you would tell me, yeah?
Yes. And so I know we've had that channel of communication in the past, so just, okay, so I feel good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to, so when a bunch of, so now you have a choice between their unhappiness and your unhappiness.
Yeah.
And which one do you choose?
Oh, probably theirs. It feels like you described so much of my life. Yeah. Whose unhappiness are we choosing between? What a horrible predicament. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's rough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Obviously, yeah, that sucks. You're either letting down people that I guess ostensibly are relying on you for something.
Tell me a story.
Tell you a story.
Like, I want the story that, like, when you're like, oh my God, I'm choosing between my unhappiness and someone else's unhappiness. Tell me that story. What comes to mind?
I don't know. It feels like almost every, I mean, like the really obvious one would be any particular story relating to people that want to hang out at a particular convention. Me giving, I do way too much like implicit acceptance or denial, so I don't really. I can. Jesus. Yeah, I guess like a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, a few friends I think wanted to go out. I think kayaking, and they were staying over here, and they messaged me in the morning, and I was flying back from another thing, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna not respond. And then when I flew in, they were like, oh, like, are you coming out? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. I might need to stream, but I didn't actually like say no. And then I kind of just like push it forward or kick it down the road until like, oh, well, it's too late to go out now. Oop, well, I guess I just have to do this now. I'm going to go work. That's probably a lot of interactions that end up like that. Yeah, that happened when I was in Austin. I think with another few people that wanted to hang out. I think it happened a few days, but yeah, these interactions happen a lot.
What is the consequence of other people's unhappiness?
It's a reward, I guess, because usually then they just like go away. So I just like get to keep working and do my own thing. I guess maybe that's why it reinforces the behavior so much. Yeah. But I guess usually if other people are unhappy, then ideally, I guess, or hopefully they rely on you less and less for kind of like any sort of like stuff for that there. And then I just, continue to navigate.
Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit back. I mean, I get that.
Sure.
So I get the fact that, I mean, I call it a fact, but like, I can see how you don't water the plants.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna uproot a plant. You're not gonna kill it. You're just gonna let it die.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Depending on, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of curious about is sometimes when people do this, they have some kind of consequence from unhappiness, which is not letting things die. This is your adaptation. So what we're trying to understand is, when did you learn that not doing this was a mistake?
When did I learn that not doing this was a mistake? As in, not.
When did you learn that evoking unhappiness explicitly, right? So because what you're doing is you're not explicitly disappointing people. You're just AFKing until they figure out you're not going to show up, which, by the way, is like such a common experience for people today.
Okay.
Like, I'm just going to like ghosting, right? Like, it's like, oh, so many of us just AFK until the shit disappears. And so usually when we see this kind of behavior, what happens is like, there's a time in your life when you were not like that. You were definitive. It resulted in someone else's unhappiness. And then you learned, no, this is a terrible idea. Because if you want to change the behavior, and we haven't even decided that you do yet, but I think you do, we have to understand how you learned this lesson in the first place. It's about unlearning, not learning.
Sure.
So are there times in your life where you've made people unhappy and you've been really punished for it?
I can't necessarily think of any.
When did you learn to fear people's unhappiness?
When did I learn to fear people's unhappiness? Probably, I guess, probably came through my first two relationships, I think. As I was like doing school and work too much, my partners wanted to see more of me, but I like was either sleeping or working or in school, and I just didn't really have enough time. And then, yeah. So it probably would have been through my first two relationships, yeah.
Okay. And what happened then when you weren't able to make them happy?
I just got really bad usually, I think. Yeah. Lots of, very intensely physically abusive, lots of cop calls and stuff. But I would say that, I think
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, I was kind of dumb. It's all good. We're cool now. But I think the pattern that I would basically fall into is that like I would become more and more disconnected. The other person would try to evoke a reaction out of me, and then eventually that would escalate into them kind of attacking me until I would respond, because obviously I had to at that point. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to need a second to process that.
Go for it.
Do you feel bad that I need some time to process that?
No, actually.
Okay.
I feel like I hope most people get this impression, when you say you need time to think, that's actually something that feels really good, because it feels like I'm saying things and you're actually taking a moment to genuinely consider them and then think of a response rather than just like going down. So that's flattering to me. Yeah.
So you don't want to be depended on. You don't want people to depend on you.
I think theoretically I do, but only if our interests are like super, super, super aligned. So like if I have like you call it a ride or die. I don't know. If you've got somebody who's like, where our interests are like 1,000,000,000% aligned, or not 1,000,000,000, it doesn't have to be completely, but if they're aligned on something, then yeah, then in that point, like being relied upon is really fun for me, because now I feel like I have a thing where it's like, I feel strongly about this. This is a person whose like feelings or livelihood I want to protect. And I feel like it's in like an arena or a realm that I excel in. And like, these are a thing that we're like mutually working towards. Like, yeah, in those cases, I think it's really fun. I don't think I would avoid it in all cases. Just usually I feel like I'm not as aligned, I guess, with the people around me sometimes, or people who've been in my life.
So I'm kind of confused. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like when you describe it, it makes a lot of sense. There's some things that I'm confused about, because when I hear about a lot of your impactful relationships, I would think that those are the ones that should be ride or die. So the traditionally your most potent or important relationships, romantic relationships, parental relationships. Do you have siblings?
Yeah. I'm not very close to any of my family, but I've got like 6 brothers and
that's
sisters.
what's kind of weird to me, right? Is that like when you say like, okay, like ride or die. So who are the people that normally in a normal life, and sorry for being judgmental and saying your life, I don't think your life is abnormal. I'm just
it was very abnormal. You're fine. It's okay.
Like we think like, okay, who's ride or die? Like your parents are ride or die, right? Like they're the ones that are behind you 100%. Your spouse, your siblings, your boyfriend, girlfriend, like these are the relationships that should be ride or die. But for some reason, the ride or die and those don't overlap. Like it feels to me like those are like there's no Venn diagram there.
I mean, like my parents and my little sister, which is probably like my immediate family, I would say, because all my older siblings are from other marriages, so they're like half siblings. Like, I think my parents would do anything for me. There are also mistakes they've made growing up, like my parents, and I've done. Hopefully, I've tried to do quite a bit for them over the past couple of years, and I think my little sister's similar. We're so different. We're just so different that I think if like my life utterly fell apart and I was homeless. And I like called mom and dad, like, Mom, Dad, I need to live with you. I'm like, my life, they would like, my mom would be super happy. She'd be like, yeah, Stevie, come back. Yeah. My parents would super love me, I know. And then even my little sister, I'm sure would do, what she could. Yeah.
How are you so different from them?
Like, how did I become different or how am I different, like in characteristic trait quality?
I was thinking more of the latter, but either one.
I don't know. I feel like, do you know like color temperatures on lights?
Sort of.
I'm like a 6,000 degree. I'm like a very cold, sterile. Like when you talk to me, like I'm very like dry, witty, sarcastic, intelligent, like biting. Like that's kind of like my character. Like maybe like a porcupine or a hedgehog. Like that's how I feel. And I would say that my family is very much like the conservative, religious, loving, like. Mom is always like baking cookies and, like they try to go to church and, like those, just very, very, very different in almost every regard. Like if you saw me with my family, I think most people that have seen me with my family think I'm like adopted. It's like, this is, insanely different types of people.
So it sounds like you're just, and it's nice to hear that your parents, sounds like there's a lot of actually love both sides.
Yeah, I think they're loving people for sure. One of the biggest distillations and differences of behavior would be like when I go to clean up, like I'll take a trash bag and I'll go through my apartment. If I haven't used it in 2 months, I just throw it away. I think my mom has every single thing any of her children have ever written on since birth. Like that's just in terms of differences. Yeah, we're just very, very, very different people. Yeah,
different people. But it sounds like there's a lot of love that you can count on them. That there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, for sure.
So kind of going back to like these social interactions and stuff, you don't want to be dependent on, so you're okay being dependent on in ride or die relationships, but how does it feel otherwise?
If it's something that I excel at, that I can do quickly, it's okay. But if it requires like a significant thing, otherwise it just feels very burdensome, I guess.
What's so burdensome about it?
What's so burdensome about it? I don't know. It just feels like a lot of time, emotional energy, for not much in return. I don't really have very many friends though. So yeah, I think that's what makes it hard to evaluate too. As I'm talking about these things, a lot of these are like people that I would say like I'm friendly with, but I don't have very many like friends. But I feel like if it was a friend making a burdensome request, I don't think I would have a problem with that. So like I live close to a guy. There's a guy called like Dan. And I think if I had like a random person and they were like, I really need a ride tomorrow to the hospital and I live like 40 minutes away, like, could you just like pick me up, like, please? I would probably say, bro, I'll just shoot you money for an Uber. Like why would I waste my time with this? But I think if Dan asked me, like, yeah, sure, of course I can do that. So I think maybe it's more, maybe also, sorry if I'm going too far off. Maybe the analysis I'm giving you of how I relate to people isn't necessarily like I treat everybody like this, but more so that like there are very, very, very few people I consider close enough to like make these types of, I guess, sacrifices for, or make these types of arrangements with. But I think for people that are close to me, I think I wouldn't have a problem doing that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you? So I know there's a meme about you being a sociopath. Like, do you think you're a sociopath?
I don't know. I'm trying to think about it. I think it's cringe.
I mean, so I'm not diagnosing you then, but I don't think you're a sociopath. Like, I don't get sociopathy from you.
That's good. All right.
I get.
I'm a diagnosed non-sociopath. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't know.
That was funny. But I mean, what I really get the sense of is that like you feel, first of all, I don't know why, but you feel so responsible for like randos. Like you don't want to inconvenience people. You don't want to burden people. You don't want to like be the result of someone's unhappiness. And maybe that's something deeper than, I mean, I think it's like having a physically abusive relationship where they made you responsible for their happiness. And it's not so much about the abuse, as it is like, I think sometimes people, this is like one of the things I've learned as a clinician is like, when I work with people, oftentimes it's all the stuff leading up to the abuse where the real damage is done, right? So when things get abusive, it's like things are untenable, but it's like all the ways that you get shaped up to that point. Does that make sense? It's like all the little compromises that you make, all the little like, because it's not at that point. It's like trying to make things work, and you give of yourself and you give of yourself and you give of yourself, and you start to like shape yourself into what they want you to be. But since they're so demanding, it's never enough. And then things escalate, and then you're like, this is crazy. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But that shaping happens like even before that.
Yeah, 100%. I can definitely sympathize or empathize with that point. Like if I was outside a bar and I got into a fight with some dude and, he ends up kicking my ass or something, like at the end, I'd be like irritated. But it's not going to have the same emotional gravity as like a fight with a significant other, where at the end it's like, Jesus Christ, like what brought us to this point that like I'm calling the cops? Like this is like insane. Yeah. And that's probably a lot more emotionally loaded with a whole bunch of other things leading up to that point. I would agree. Yeah.
No, what I'm even saying is before the fight with the cops with your significant other, what I'm talking about is 3 months before that fight, there was something about you ordered pizza and they got pissed at you.
Sure.
Something insignificant that is actually quite emotionally shaping. What was the path before things got abusive?
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And what I'm kind of curious about is like, so what's wrong with, and don't say nothing, don't say this is stupid.
Okay.
What's wrong with telling people, hey, I'm flying in today, and they're like, hey, do you want to go kayaking? You're like, I'm going to be flying in. I'm pretty tired, so I think I'll pass.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. That should be what I do. Yeah.
Remember, you can't say nothing's wrong with it. What's wrong with it?
Oh, I can't even. Oh, wait, I have to like, what's wrong with it? As in like what it feels wrong to me, or?
Yeah, like why? Like you don't do that, right? So we have to reverse engineer. We can't say what should be. We have to accept what is there. Nothing's wrong. There's something wrong with it. Otherwise, you would do it.
Oh, yeah. I guess I feel like I'm letting the other person down.
What's wrong with letting the other person down?
The person views me, I guess, as some sort of person that they want to spend time with or hang out with or have fun with, and I'm completely failing to, I guess, live up to that expectation.
What's wrong with that?
It feels like I fostered some kind of expectation in the other person that they can have that expectation of me, and I'm failing to live up to that, maybe?
Let me ask in a different way.
Okay.
Who's someone that you had an expectation with that let you down? Who's someone that you wanted to hang out with more?
I don't know. I never ask. I just never make requests to people. It's a bad character trait of mine. Did I ask you to come on my podcast, right?
No.
Did I bring that up in our last conversation? Or I might have brought it up, like, if you're in Miami, you should come by. Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something.
Oh, okay,
like that.
yeah. If I did, that took a lot of building up to do, because normally I just don't make requests of people ever. Yeah. But if I did, that was something I had to think about a lot before. Okay, I'm going to ask him this particular thing, because I always feel like I'm imposing on other people, which is stupid. I know I'm not. I just did the thing. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So good awareness, right? You don't have to fix it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just aware, right? So notice that self-judgment. It's not dispassionate, Stephen. Do you see that? It's not dispassionate.
What
It's like the judgment. It's not a logical analysis. It's a judgment.
Is it? I don't know if it is.
It is.
Oh, okay. I mean, like, rationally, it's just not true. I know I'm not imposing. I know you can say no. Like, it's stupid to feel like it's an imposition
Right.
for
So
me to, yeah.
if it's not rational, then what is it?
Emotional?
Yes. And judgments are emotional, not rational. Or this version. There's other versions that you can arrive at a logical judgment, but that's not what's going on here. Like, that's the point, right? It's like, it's so simple that it's like so sort of weird that, like, obviously you know that rationally it's not okay, but the crazy thing is that this is rational. At its core, it's rational, because emotions are to conceive of yourself as your words. No human being is a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So a rational analysis of yourself must include emotion.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree with that.
Right? Your words. And so this reaction that you have is very reflexive. This is a vasana. It's a mental habit. It is something that in the CBT would be called an automatic thought.
Okay.
So let's kind of go back to this, because I mean, I think this is like, to me, there's a couple of really important things here. So, and I don't think you're sociopathic. Once again, I'm not clinically evaluating for antisocial personality disorder, but
Okay.
what I see is a lot of your coldness is actually like kind of compassion. Like there's another weird angle to this, which is that why are you so sensitive to not making other people unhappy? Because you know what it's like to being on the receiving end of that behavior.
Sure, but I feel like I don't think I agree with the characterization though, because I feel like if it was compassionate, I would just make the other decision and make myself less comfortable. I feel like at the end it just ends about being selfishly motivated. Like, oh, I feel bad because I'm being a lazy.
You've gone
whatever.
so far down the end. You've circumnavigated sociopathy and ended up in compassion.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I'll take that.
I know you don't. So let
Okay,
me
sure.
toss something out.
Yeah,
okay?
go for it.
I'm not saying I'm right, by the way.
No, yeah,
This
that's
is
fine,
Okay. So like, did you want your dad to come to your music performances?
I feel like the deeper question isn't like, did I want them to come? Maybe it would be like, did I want them to come? Does that make sense? Because I think
Yes.
genuinely at the end, I don't really think I did. I didn't really care much about it. And then I would get annoyed if they'd show up because I feel like they're just there. Actually, no. I have been down the street before. I think the thought was that like, I want somebody to come or I want somebody to do something, but only if there's like a genuine interest in the thing. Recircling, when we talk about compliments, and I don't genuinely like compliments, I don't like compliments because I feel like a lot of them are given in lieu of something else or to express something else. So, for instance, let's say that I have a partner and we wake up and like, oh, you look really handsome. It's like, yeah, okay, that's like how I always look. Like that'd be whatever. But like, let's say that we dressed up to go out somewhere nice and like, oh wow, you look really handsome in that outfit. That would feel better because it's like, oh, I feel like that's a genuine thing that you're actually saying, and it's not just like an out of hand expression of some random emotional state you have of me that like means nothing to me. So like, if a parent showed up to a concert and they were like, wow, you played so well, I'd be like, okay, thanks, mom, your dad. Yeah, obviously. But if they came up and they said something along the lines of like, wow, like I've heard you struggle with this piece for like 2 weeks and you nailed this solo on this piece here. Good job. That would feel a lot more fulfilling. It's like, oh, you are genuinely noticing what I'm doing. You're genuinely having an interest, and the compliment is reflecting that genuine interest in that thing. Yeah. Maybe that's everybody with compliments. No, that's not everybody though, because people like random shit all the time. But I think that's how I would, yeah.
Yeah. So see, there you did the second guessing or the self analysis, but without judgment, right? So there was no I'm dumb for thinking that.
Yeah.
So next thing to consider. So it sounds like the compliments have to be filtered through your own perception.
For me to like them, yeah. But that's probably normal, right?
I mean, I don't.
I think that's
It is
normal.
not-
Yeah,
it
they
is
have to
not
hit you.
abnormal.
Yeah, because if I were to walk up to a bunch of random girls, and be like, wow, your boobs are so nice. Like most girls are like, I don't appreciate that. I'm like, well, that's because you're filtering through your perception. It would just be not appropriate.
No,
right?
but
Yeah.
I mean, my point is that like, so I don't think that's normal.
Okay.
So it's common, sure, but I want you like, so the whole point of a compliment is like, this is what I think about you. It doesn't have to be tempered or filtered through what you think about yourself. Now, I think it's very common.
Can I wait?
someone-
Can I hit on that for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I haven't considered this before, maybe, or this thought popped in my head, so I haven't like. Maybe I feel like when somebody compliments me, and it's not a genuine compliment, it almost feels like somebody's making a deposit that they're trying to withdraw on later, I guess. So if somebody gives me that compliment about like the music thing, or like they've like a genuine noticing of something and they've said like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like that feels like, oh, wow, you noticed something that's really well. If somebody's just like giving me like a random whatever, it feels like a social nicety or some transaction or some deposit that I'm going to have to like, okay, well, you said this. So I guess like somebody got me a gift for Christmas and I have to get you a gift back. Maybe I think like maybe that's the feeling. It feels like a little bit more transactional or less genuine, or like there's some other
Feels like a debt.
yeah. Yes.
It's a burden.
Yeah.
So that I think is definitely tracks, right? Because like burdens you don't want. You don't want to be you don't want other people depending on you. You don't want to owe people things. You want to be independent.
Yes.
You don't want to be connected.
Yeah.
So I think that is there. I think there's another way to think about it. And these things aren't mutually exclusive, by the way. Mm-hmm. Which is like, I know it's kind of weird, but like, let's say I have, I'll use an extreme example, body dysmorphia. and you look at me and you see someone who is a 10 out of 10. Now you say that to me, and since I have body dysmorphia, I dismiss what you say. Right? So this is like filtering a compliment through my own perception. Now, is this common? I don't know what you mean by the word normal. Is it common? Quite. But I don't think that, I think that generally speaking, and now we get to this thing again, that is also common in people who have an insecurity. So when you feel insecure about something, you have difficulty accepting compliments about it because you're filtering it through your own insecurity.
Okay, can I ask a question on this? When I'm complimenting people, or when I'm like, I think about this a lot in debate for persuasion, for instance, but even in like in warm relationships, when I'm complimenting somebody, I'm almost always thinking of it from, I try to think of it from their frame of reference or from their perspective. So if somebody is, let's say somebody worked on an art project, and where I'm at in my life right now, the things that I value the most are, can I get a 24 to 48 hour turnaround on an email, and how reliable are you? These are like the two most important things for an employee to me. So let's say somebody finishes an art project and they got it done like really quickly. If I looked at that art project, and I know that that's to them not what they're thinking about, that's not what they value the most. They value like the artistic merits of what they've done. If I was going to give a compliment to that person, I wouldn't compliment them on the thing that I appreciate. I would compliment them on the thing that I think they appreciate. So I wouldn't say like, wow, I can't believe you got this back to me in a day, thanks. I would say something like, wow, this looks like really good. Congratulations, or like, this is like a really cool art piece, because I think that they would value that comment more. Do you think that's like an ordinary way of like how people compliment each other, or a thing to consider, or is that bad or good? Or what are your thoughts on that, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. So I think it is an ordinary way to compliment people. And there's a beautiful way for us to get past a slice of whatever the fuck is going on.
Okay.
Which is, I think you should stop doing that. So I'll tell you a story, okay? So I was once working with a pro gamer, and this pro gamer was up and coming. And they would sometimes travel to a different region of the world to boot camp, where there were lots of tournaments. And we were talking about when this person would play with the top tier pros. This person is arguably like a tier 2 pro at the time. They would talk to the top tier, they would play pub with the top tier pros. And then if they ever made a mistake in the pub, they would feel so bad about themselves, because these are the best players in the world that are seeing this mistake, and they must think I'm like shit, right? Like, because I'm making these shit mistakes. They thought I'm shit. They're seeing me for shit. Not surprisingly, this person was also quite toxic in pubs in their home region when they're streaming. Mm-hmm. And so one really interesting thing is that the way that, and you've already sort of figured this out, but we let's just state it, which is like, see, the way that you interpret other people's compliments has to do with the way that you give compliments. This is 101, like human behavior 101. If I give you, so some people value, let's talk about gift giving. So some people, like, the monetary value of the gift is what's important. Okay. For other people, it's the thought that counts, right? So I will give gifts based on my internal compass of gift giving. So, and it's both ways. When I receive a gift, I interpret it this way. And when I give a gift, I'm using the same rubric. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one thing that I would encourage you to do is start complimenting people for what you value, not what they value. You can do both, but at least do one. So because what you're doing is like, if you compliment people, quote unquote, deceptively, and I don't think deceptive is really the fair term, but I'm using it as kind of a hyperbole. Then when other people compliment you, it is more likely to be interpreted as deceptive, because that's the rubric in your mind. You give compliments to people based on what they will like.
Okay.
When I think about, yeah.
And you can keep going. I'm writing some of this down now. But so, I have a really big question. You can keep going if you want to take a pit stop here about that deceptive thing. That's something that I have a really hard time dealing with. But we can put a pin on that and come back if you want.
Yeah, let's put a pin on it. So I think it's the same thing. Well, I'm leading there. Okay. So what I've come to realize is like authenticity goes a long way. That's the most important thing. And sometimes you'll be amazed at how much it can change people, because see, right now we're talking about their self-perception. You're feeding into that self-perception. We're all playing the game on their perception. Mm-hmm. We're filtering things through their insecurity. We're all thinking about what's in their head. The beautiful thing about an authentic compliment is that you are pulling them outside of their head and into your head. When someone values their artistic merit, they may have never thought of themselves as professional, reliable, or timely. They're not in a STEM field, right? Those are the things that STEM people value, or people in finance. What you value about another human being, if you authentically share with them, it's maybe not what they're looking for, but you will be amazed at how it can be worth twice as much. When someone thinks they're ugly and thinks they're smart, they get a lot more out of being told they're beautiful than they do from getting told that they're smart. They may be confused by the beauty, and that's why the authenticity matters. And in the same way that you sort of talk about if someone says something with a lot of like flavor to it, right? Hey, I really appreciate, and you did this when you like kind of talk about this conversation with Sneeko or whatever, like you authentically share what I appreciate about it. The value comes not from what I think, I mean, maybe you were doing it with me, but I don't get the perception that you were telling me that because like I value that. I think that was genuine appreciation for something. That's what I received. That's what I heard.
A little bit, yeah. It was that's like a golden zone compliment where it was something that I valued, but I hope it's something that you value. So it goes back to that when I was saying like when the interests align, like everything works out really well.
So golden zone is great, right? So when you can scratch both of those itches, fair enough. But I would encourage you to start giving people compliments that are more about where you come from.
Okay.
So I learned this lesson one day when I saw one of my mentors compliment an old lady about their appearance. And this is a psychiatrist, and it was just eye-opening to me. Because I see these old ladies that are out, right? And old ladies are usually dressed up. If you don't pay attention, you won't notice this. I'd never paid attention to this before.
I worked at a casino, and the old ladies that would come in, they'd always have like these cute dresses on and their purses and
right.
earrings.
They're so careful about their appearance.
Mm-hmm.
They put so much time and energy, and what we see is their age, right? We see someone who, and so we don't compliment, like we as men oftentimes will just compliment people based on our genitals.
Sure.
Or what we think is hot or whatever. There's all that mating and compliments get tied up so much for us. It's a mess. Mm-hmm. It's such a mess. And to take a moment and appreciate that, wow, this person got together, woke up today, looked in the mirror, they're like 70 years old, they picked this particular hair clip with this particular earrings and this particular lipstick. This is an ensemble of intention. And to recognize and appreciate that, and to even look at that. Right. And this falls a little bit more potentially into what you're saying, which is telling people what they want to hear. But this person genuinely appreciated the effort that went into this.
Okay.
And it was like really opened my eyes. And I think whatever you receive from other people is your brain kind of works the same way. And so if you change what you give, your brain will automatically change what you receive.
So you think, so the hypothesis here being that if I were to genuinely compliment people on the things that I appreciate, you think that I would receive their if I compliment people from my appreciation, from my frame of reference, I would start receiving their compliments better even from their frame of reference? Is that essentially what you're saying?
Absolutely. Right now it's no longer filtered through your insecurity.
Huh. Okay.
Right? And then hopefully over time, you'll be able to discern when people are bullshitting you because you can still tell the authenticity, right? So you're familiar with the golden zone. You know what it looks like. And so when people are BSing you, I think it'll help a lot because then the other cool thing that will happen is when you start complimenting out of authenticity. Are you expecting anything in return?
No, I'm not, no.
Right? So once you start giving without expectation, you can receive without expectation. It's both ways. Right? So right now when you compliment someone, and I think this is why people will allude that you're I don't think you're sociopathic, but third time.
Thanks.
But I think it's like, because you're kind of playing this game and you had to learn how to play that game, I think, early on, right? So like the other humans, you didn't know how they worked because you were a 6,000 hue whatever in a porcupine, and they're like otters that are snuggling with each other. Right? So you had to like learn this way of interacting with the humans because you were a different kind of kid. And so I think that a lot of it's crazy, but like these old spiritual traditions always like talk about the benefits of things like compassion and stuff like that. And then they also say something weird. We think compassion is about making the world a better place. It's not just about making the world a better place. It's about making you a better person. Mm-hmm. To practice compassion and forgiveness changes the way that you receive what the world gives you. And everyone is so caught up circling back to what we originally talked about everything that's wrong on the internet, that we stop looking at ourselves. We stop looking at, like, let me just be genuine with another human being. Let me offer what I have without expectation. And then you can receive what other people have without expectation. It becomes joyous. Because right now, think about what you're doing to your life, Stephen. When someone does something nice for you, instead of enjoying it, you feel burdened and indebted. Like, what the f***? Kindness from another human being increases your burden? No wonder you don't have many friends. And now there are certain beautiful things that you've been able to accomplish. There are certain relationships that you can create that bypass this mechanism. Ride or die. My parents love me no matter what. My mom would be thrilled, and fresh baked cookies. Right? So you're not busted. You're not screwed up. You're not ill or anything like that. This is normal. All human beings are like this. Everyone, their mind gets shaped without their knowledge or consent. Yours has been too. Mine has been too. So I'd say try to change a little bit about what you put out into the world, and it'll change the way that you receive what the world will give you. And the beautiful thing is you'll be able to, when someone compliments you for something, even if you don't believe it about yourself, you'll be able to receive it, and it can improve your day. Last thing is that there's a lot of stuff about this whole, like, insecurity, like, being responsible for other people's happiness. I don't think that that is directly related to this. I think that's a different thing. But I do think there's something about, you know, like, and I think it's hard to admit, especially, so this is harder to admit if you have a good relationship with your parents. Easier to admit if they're abusive. So when you love your parents, it's much harder to say, it really hurt me that you didn't show up all the time. Right?
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like, this is another thing that I learned clinically. I had one patient who I've learned so much. And when we love our parents, it's hard to find fault with them. And if we can't find fault with our parents, we can't admit how we've been hurt. And if we can't admit how we've been hurt and we suppress it and we don't acknowledge it, then it leads exactly to the picture that we see with you, which is confusing and makes no sense. I'm not insecure, but I feel insecure. I have all the features of insecurity, but I'm not insecure. And then the last thing is that this can be states. So it's not that you are or aren't. It is that there is a dormant part of your mind that arises in some cases. In certain circumstances, these things come up. And you're so beautiful at talking about them, right? So it's like when your grandmother is like, where are you? When these people are like, you're flying back and they want to go kayaking. These moments where this complex arises. And the rest of the time, you're fine. We know you're secure. Because you can take on some of the biggest wigs in the industry and hold your own. You have confidence. You have faith in what you're doing in the world. You have a foundation of what it means to be good, how you want to see the world change. And we can see all the confidence that comes. People detect it. That's why they can't push you around.
Sure.
Right? It doesn't matter how rich they are or how much money they are or how many more followers than they have. And you are centered. The only problem is that when this thing arises, you become uncentered. Can you feel the difference?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? So it's not either or, it's both. And one is dormant. It's an issue of state, not trait.
Yeah, that
it's not stats. It's like tank stance or DPS stance or healing stance. You had a question?
No, I don't think it's as relevant anymore. I was going to ask before, in terms of like complimenting people or saying things that I know people want to hear, like how much of this is deceptive versus if I'm trying to communicate a genuine interest to somebody, I might say a particular thing that I care about, but I don't think they care about it. So then instead I might say something that I know that they care about, would something like that count as deceptive? But you're just saying to just like compliment on things that I would care about regardless and not try to get into other people's frame of reference so much, I guess.
So there's a nuance there. So
Sure.
I'm not saying that you should do entirely one. What I'm saying is that you should start piloting the other and see what happens.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
And then the right answer is then focus on your perception. Because right now, when we're talking about compliment, we're all talking about you. Should you do it this way? Should you do it this way? But at some point, what you want to then do is see how they receive the compliment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah.
And then once you operate from perception, then you by all means can fit yourself to who they are.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's deceptive. It's just as long as you're not deceptive, it's not deceptive.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question: what is like the limiting principle on this? How far? Let's say. So I'll hyperbolize really hard in the other direction. Somebody sees me, and every single time they see me, they're like, "I really like those Ralph Lauren sweatpants. They're the coolest thing ever." And they just really like complimenting these things, but I really just don't care about this, or I really just don't enjoy this, or I don't like this particular compliment. Do you? I guess from a personal development level, would you try to always receive every single compliment as well as you can and always be appreciative of them? Or do you start putting up some line somewhere, like assuming it's not like an insulting thing or a horrible thing, but like how do you moderate that, I guess? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking, and I think it's a relatively unimportant problem to solve. So let me share with you what I mean by that. Okay. Yeah. So like I'm with you that now you're asking about the extremes. So that's where like I think my focus is not on the top of the mountain. Yeah. It's like on this next step.
Or even like I'm using an extreme to test the principle, I guess. I'm just thinking in terms of like logical, whatever bullshit. But like, so for instance, I guess to ground it out more realistically. So in my life, this is an issue I have in a lot of relationships. For every partner I've dated, I think my partners are beautiful. I like them all the time, regardless of how they look. I don't care at all about like compliments about my physical. It means absolutely nothing to me. But that seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of people. People like to be told that they're beautiful. People like to say that their partner is pretty or handsome or whatever. Would this be a thing where like I should say like, hey, listen, just don't say this about me? Or do you just like, would you say that like, oh, well, you should learn to just take those compliments, be happy? That would be like a more grounded example, I guess.
Yeah. What beautiful question, right? Sure. So what I would say is a couple things. One is that you could ask this person, can you help me understand why you keep on commenting on my appearance, right?
Okay.
I feel secure in the way that I look. Like I don't need to hear that kind of thing. Like I'm with you. I think you're beautiful. Mm-hmm. The way that you act towards me makes me feel like physically attractive.
Yeah.
So I don't need to hear that. Can you help me understand what makes you say it? So I would start by understanding, because anytime we're talking about, so there's a couple layers here. The first is what we're doing in your mind. So this intervention is not about your relationships. It's about you. It's about changing the way that you interact with other people and changing the way that you receive others' interactions. Mm-hmm. Once we add another person to the equation, then we enter the realm of perception, then we enter the realm of compromise. So I think it's totally fine to start to investigate some, but then practically, and we'll get to your extreme example, by the way.
Sure.
Which is not actually, I mean, it's extreme, but I don't think it's useful, but there is a real answer there that's important on some level.
Yeah. I don't really care that much about the extreme. I'm just curious, like, how you limit,
Yeah. So I don't, and then the next thing is that you just acknowledge that, okay, like in this person's life, it is important for them. And this is the key thing, right? So we're going to work on you. And once you yourself are settled, you can receive what the rest of the world sends your way. Mm-hmm. So it is important for my partner to compliment me physically. This is the way that they express their approval for me. This is the way that they strive to make me feel better about myself. And you can just accept that as it is. And so you were asking a question, the extreme example, right? So I recognize where you don't really need that. But if someone was complimenting me every day, bro, has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with them. Does that make sense on a simple level? Like if every time I saw you, Destiny, I was like, oh my God, Destiny, you're so great, bro. Oh my God, your beard and this and that. And you're so, like, that has nothing to do with you, right? That is a projection from the other person.
Okay.
So the whole point is that, and this is where things end up, right? So if you want to know what the final optimal omega form of this is where we get close to moksha or enlightenment. It is to be completely centered within yourself and not have this be affected by what is out there. I can say yes to kayaking. I can say no to kayaking. I can say whatever. I don't need to play some game. And if they're unhappy, it's to separate ourselves from the outside world, right? So their unhappiness is over there. I'm centered over here. I'm going to act in a way that I think is positive. The beautiful thing that when you do that, you become very perceptive, because now you're not clouding things. You're not shaping their compliments. When you give a compliment, you can't authentically say something because, once again, klishta, your mind attaches all of these things. And when someone says, Destiny, you're so great, what the f-? Compliment becomes a burden. Why? Because of klishta. Your mind attaches all of these things to that compliment. But that's not in the compliment. There may be a reality to transactional relationships. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that your mind should be able to tell the difference, and you will be able to. So as you become centered in yourself, you disentangle the self from the outside world, then you can perceive the outside world for what it is. And you will know instantly whether someone is bullshitting you or not. You will be able to see people. You will become the best lie detector. Because now your own mind, think about what lets people get away with lies. It's not that they're skilled liars. The best liar is someone who lines up their lies with the vulnerability of the other person.
Yeah.
So as you become centered, then it will become very clear. You can operate with freedom, without burden. You can act spontaneously. You can perceive what's going on and perceive it as it is. And so then in what to do, should I compliment or not compliment? Your mind will say, okay, this person, I can say this authentically and it makes them feel a certain way. So I can offer this person this compliment on a regular basis. It doesn't do me any harm. I'm not trying to cultivate some niceness, and I'm not trying to take advantage of them or groom or anything. What does it hurt me to offer? If an old lady needs help crossing the street every time she crosses the street, what does it hurt me to help them cross the street? If someone else needs to hear that they're beautiful on a daily basis, what does it hurt me to tell them that they're beautiful? And then as you perceive, you'll also be able to see this is harmful. Now this person is becoming dependent. Now if I don't compliment them, I will ruin their day. Right? You'll be able to see all of those things. It'll become very clear. And then you'll know what to do. It'll become easy.
Okay. Okay. Let me summarize some advice and then spit it back at you, and then you can tell me if I'm roughly understanding this. That I'm spending too much time in my head trying to intellectualize like these social interactions and thinking about it from other people's perspectives, and I guess I'm missing the forest for the trees to some extent, and that as I'm talking to people, instead of trying to think so hard about like, well, what do they want to hear, or what would be a way to optimize this interaction or whatever, I should just think of things that I appreciate, compliment people authentically for those things. As I do that, I'm probably going to foster friendships that are more aligned with what I would want anyway, because they're appreciating those compliments. Those people will be pulled a little bit more into my headspace. They'll appreciate those compliments, and it'll help me see the way that other people compliment me. I won't be filtering it as hardcore as I do through my mind, like I'm expecting everybody else to. And that through, I guess, fostering those types of engagements with people, those interactions, not only will it make my interactions with them better, it'll help me more clearly understand their interactions with me, I guess, kind of. Is that, am I close?
I think you're close.
Okay.
But I think, once again, I'm seeing a lot of trees, but not the forest from your answer.
Yeah, I'm a very discreet trees person. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So that's okay, right? So I think that there's no doubt in my mind that this will help you in some way.
Okay.
I think one thing that I would strongly encourage you to do, so this is at the peak, is pay attention, Stephen, to the boundary between you and another human being. And I think that you know how to do this. I think this is why, like I said, I'm serious when I say I think you can hold your own with a lot of heavyweights. And that can't happen unless you're centered in here.
Sure. Can you expand on that a little bit when you say be aware of the boundary between you and other human beings? What do you mean when you say boundary there?
So you're okay pissing people off on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Because you're over here and they're out there.
To some extent.
Right.
I mean, I can do it in a live debate too, but there's a separation, like in terms of relationship, friend group, everything.
Your feelings are not dependent upon another person's feelings. This is fundamental.
Yeah.
You can say things that upset someone because you are centered, and if they want to get upset, they can get upset. Now, let's take the case of your grandmother. Why are you worrying? I get irritated. Your feelings are tied to her feelings. You want her feelings to change so that your feelings will change. Your partner is unhappy. This makes you unhappy. Her happiness is dependent on your behavior. There's a tangling up of you and another. This must change. In one, you know how to do this. There must be separation between you and the other person. The other person has their own feelings. If they want to worry, let them worry. What is it to you? If you care about them, by all means, intervene in some way. But your feelings should not be tangled up in these.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. Let me summarize. Okay, hold on. Okay, maybe this clicks a little bit more. Or I'm reinterpreting now. So, okay, so before I'm thinking, what are the things that I can say to evoke in them things that make me feel better? But rather you're saying that I should take a more honest approach in how I communicate with other people and let them feel what they feel without making my feelings reliant on their feelings.
I'd even say forget the first half. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but this is the key.
Or the first half was the wrong part. Yeah, it's like this is what I was saying before. You're saying I should just do this particular thing, right?
Yeah, so what I want you to really pay attention to, and this is all you need. You don't need to do anything. Remember, awareness is enough. Notice the communication between your feelings and someone else's feelings. Because all of the things that you struggle with are tangled up. Oh, they'll feel offended if I don't go kayaking. Now your feelings, I feel offended, I feel I don't want to do this, but I don't want to disappoint them. So your internal environment is tied to their response. This will never work. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing is you have this figured out because you've already done this. 90% of Destiny is good at this. Steven sometimes struggles. So just notice the independence of you from the outside world. And then the beautiful thing is you can circumnavigate this globe. Okay. And when you become more and more independent, in turn, what will finally happen in the final stage is you will actually be joined with the other people.
Okay. Yeah. So then my other question relating to this is it's like a limiting principles question, but maybe you just kind of got there in a roundabout way. Is I'm sure there's a way that you could practice this in a way that would be toxic. Is that just intuitive? So like if my partner was right. Like my mom died, I really need a conversation. And I'm like, I don't really feel like talking to you about that. You deal with your own emotions. That would probably not be a good thing, right?
No. So this is so the path of spirituality is a license for assholery.
Yeah.
So this happens all the time. And it comes from a logical application to it as opposed to what I would call spiritual or authentic application to it. Mm-hmm. So if I say I'll just give you an example. Let's say living in the present. Or let's use this example. So, right, to not have your feelings tangled up with another person's feelings. Mm-hmm. Now, what some people will interpret that as if you're feeling hurt, you're hurt. I'm good. This is totally fine. Leads to assholery. I'm not saying don't care about another person's feelings. So it's in what we leave out. What is absolutely not good is to have a seesaw between your emotions and someone else's emotions.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but this sounds very similar to some guy. It's a 3-minute YouTube video or whatever, but it has to do with the difference between compassion and empathy, that it's really good to feel compassion for people because it means that you're aware of their feelings and you take them into account with your actions. But empathy, where you just feel what they feel or have a reaction to their feelings emotionally, is a very bad thing and it doesn't really help as much. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be bad.
Sure.
So
not necessarily,
if you look at medical doctors and psychiatrists, mm-hmm. we are generally speaking more sociopathic than the average population. And psychiatrists, I think, are more sociopathic than the average doctor. This is not because we're all evil. This is because if we have the torrent of empathy that runs through our brains, we will get torn apart. People wonder, how can you deal with suicidal people every day and not be depressed? The only way you can do it is by being centered. It doesn't mean that you can't be compassionate. In fact, it offers you then become a stable ground for people who are drowning. Mm-hmm. So you're right that if misapplied, if incompletely applied, this results in problems. Absolutely. The beautiful thing is that if you understand the essence of it and you live out the principle, it will become clear.
Okay.
Cool.
Wow.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like we're at a good stopping point.